Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome back to Detonation. Look, we have the second virtual debate happening here. It's going to be happening very shortly, coming to a screen near you. So we're all very excited for that. Pushing back against aging, death, disease, scarcity. It's going to be great. I'm trying to see if any of the candidates want to come on and have a quick final last-minute squiz on the show before they head in, but it doesn't matter anyway because regardless, we're going to have a great show. I have an exclusive update from Mr. Gennady himself, which I'm going to read out, getting closer to the debate because it's going to cement the foundations of how the debate will sort of function. And the sort of atmosphere that he wants for the debate to make it an uplifting and wholesome debate, because as we know on this show, we've been covering controversy surrounding some of the candidates, and that's okay. It's politics. I myself have no problem with that, but they want to go above and beyond and over the state of politics that exists today within some of that debate. I just argue that it's natural and inherent and you can't escape it, and because it's all built in with human fallacies. But that doesn't matter because you can always try better. You can always try to achieve more, and you can always try to strive for the more uplifting path. So to remind everybody who, what, when, where, why, how, we've got the three big candidates. These are the three big people. So we've got Mr. Holtzapfel. He's the 222 candidate. That's 2,000. That's 2,000 calories, 2,000 square feet of living space, and 2,000 gallons of water a year, or some derivative of that number. 222. He's a human-based candidate. He's a humanist, structural humanist, in the fact that he wants to concentrate his efforts on fixing some of the problems that are in line with the United Nations sustainability goals, which are human-based problems. We have Rachel Haywire. She is a candidate based firmly in cultural art and other cultural sort of aesthetics. She is very much into music, art, movies, anything to do with culture. She's full on into that sort of stuff. That includes all the emerging VR and all the other great stuff that's coming out. And then you have Ben Zion, Johannon Ben Zion, and he is a very structuralist, policy-orientated candidate, very strong candidate in terms of he understands hard-edged, hard-nosed, scientific, rigorous approach to many of the topics that are going on. So these are the three candidates that we have lined up here in the second virtual debate. We were waiting on Gennady and the crew there at Transhumanism HQ United States. I just want to speak on why do we cover these guys and not some of the others? Because these guys are the real deal. This is the real party. These are the ones you want to concentrate on. This is the one that has been ordained as the party that's going to actually achieve something. They don't engage in petty political infighting, petty political motivations, and other things. So we like to concentrate on this party because this is the real deal. The chat, the window over there, so the window that we're looking at, has already tons of people. I mean, I'm talking there's 20 people plus waiting in that chat. I know there's a few different people waiting in our chat. So, you know, all up, this already has a broadcast reach of 50 plus people or something across all the different channels. So, you know, so this is becoming quite the debate from when I used to watch these sorts of things years ago, and it was just me sitting in a room on my own. You know, it's blowing up into a commercial infrastructure. It's blowing up into a real life political dogfight, and that's what I like to see, because these issues are very important. As you can see here in the chat, we have some questions. some people saying that that they will be excited to go along. But some questions here that we might expect to hear from from Gennady and co, the great debate master himself. How would you intend to bring relevance and population to the Transhumanist Party, and do you have any examples of your ability to do this? So populations. So they're asking how do they grow the membership of the Transhumanist Party there. Question for the candidates: how can political stratification in the US be addressed? Does technology play a role in this growing divide? Absolutely, that's a great question. I can't hear that zinger from the candidates. Someone here said vertical farming, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, nanotechnology, robotics. Ask them how they feel about this, please. And that's something that I've been trying to do here on this channel, trying to tease out some of those other policy options, and get their feeling on some of these technologies, because these technologies are really important. These technologies are the pathway to advanced health, longevity, immortality, essentially, post-scarcity society. And in the short run, just a better existence. I mean, a better existence for everyone, which is really good. So that's what we kind of want to hear, and that's what we kind of want to see. So that's really exciting. So what else have we got here? Question: how will your platform lead to people transcending human limits? Which will it help them? So that's a platform policy question for the candidates themselves. So I think on that one, probably Ben Zion would have a very strong one to go on. I think Holtzapfel might struggle a little bit on that question there. Just simply because Ben Zion's such a strong policy. I think Haywire will have no idea knocking that over either. So these are all very good questions coming out of here. Curious, if they were president, what would they put? Would they put a vertical farming tower in every city? So vertical farming in every city. So that's a question that they want to know. The people want to know. Is there a provision based inside their platforms to allow for a vertical farming tower in every city? And I think Mr. Holsopple actually might be strong on that question because it's a very human-centric focused, and he's talking about food all the time. So I'd like to see Mr. Holsopple's answer on that. Mike DeVerde says here, question for Ben Zion: please explain why you admire Chinese authoritarianism. I like that question a lot because I think he accused me pretty much, without knowing it, of being a China hawk. But again, as I said in the debate, in an interview with Rachel Haywire, this guy is sitting behind the United States. And I much prefer Rachel Haywire's take on the anti-Chinese surveillance state. I think Ben Zion personally doesn't know what he's talking about because he's not out here in the front line with the rest of us, with the Chinese dovishness that's going on there. I think there has to be some room for strength. So that's a good question from Mike DeVerde right there. I like that. I'd like to see what happens. So less than 2 minutes on the clock. Are there any ways as president you can address the careless amounts of inefficiency in our current systems of commerce and the excess of resources and labor these things currently require? That's an interesting question there. There is a lot of inefficiencies. Capitalism is geared for cost efficiency. But some other efficiencies are usually neglected. That's from Vivian Oblivion. I like the name. So yes, like environmental deficiencies and other things. So Vivian Oblivion there has a good point. We've got 1:30 on the clock until apparently we're going to be starting this debate, and it's all going to be very exciting. And I'm going to be quiet here. So I'll get us some hype music going so that it can start to feel the mood, because we want this mood to be extremely high energy as we move into this, because some of these issues will be a lot of fun. Someone here, David Schumacher, says, "What do you consider the number one issue for the US Transhumanist Party? How are you addressing this issue?" What do you consider the number one issue for the US Transhumanist Party, and how are you addressing this issue? That's a very good question. That's a tough question, and I'm glad I'm not answering that, because it is a small party, and when you're a small party, you have a lot of quote-unquote issues to play with. So that will be a very interesting one coming out of the candidates' mouths, and I hope they know their minor politics. So according to this, we should be going. So we'll put some music on, and we'll start the stream. And just a reminder, the clock is the countdown to the end of membership. So if you want to vote before that clock ticks down. So I wanted to quickly read out the exclusive statement that we have for Gennady to set the atmosphere. And he says here, my priority is for this to be a civil, structured debate where there is transparency about the candidates and where they will be able to field challenging questions and interact with one another while remaining within the parameters of civilized discourse. This is important for us to show that transhumanist policies can rise above the typical negative political campaigning. So I hope that sets the tone and the atmosphere for the debate. I have word from the ground that they will be moving within the minutes. So I hope that clears up some of the questions, considering the recent controversy. So that would be very nice.
bensound.com. 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 bensound.com.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II. I am the chairman of the United States Transhumanist Party, and we are here for our second Transhumanist Presidential Debate. Today, we have our three candidates who are competing in the forthcoming electronic primary: Rachel Haywire, Johannon Ben Zion, and Charles Holsopple. We had a quite in-depth and constructive exchange during our first virtual debate on July 6th. And this debate is going to be a bit different in its format, in the sense that the first debate focused on the general views of the candidates regarding their own campaigns, as well as the core ideals of the US Transhumanist Party, and some issues of general interest to transhumanists. In this debate, we are going to focus more on candidate specifics and on the backgrounds of the candidates, on certain issues and indeed certain controversies that have emerged during the course of this campaign season. Our intent is to have as much transparency as we can. And if there are certain questions that people have had, if there are certain concerns that people have had, this will be a good venue to address them, but to address them in a structured and civil format where we can discuss the substance of the issues while keeping the tone constructive. So with that, our first segment of the debate is going to be a campaign update from each candidate. Essentially, since the July 6th debate, they will provide an update regarding their subsequent campaign activities, discuss the unique features of their approach thus far in campaigning for the presidency of the United States, and make any general appeals that they would like to make to our membership. Now, that is going to be the easy part of the debate, and subsequently the challenging part will begin. But first, we will start with the easy part. 5 minutes to each candidate for a campaign update. Candidate Rachel Haywire, you were selected by our random number generator to go first, so you have the floor for 5 minutes.
All right, so we've got
I'm really
Rachel.
happy to be selected by randomness because, as you guys know, I love chaos. So my campaign has been a lot of fun. I've been doing a lot of outreach to people inside and outside of the Transhumanist Party, and I've been recruiting a lot of new members, everything from going on podcasts to growing my dissident media platform, Trigger Warning. I just released a new article on Trigger Warning called Fashion for the Faceless, an article about how to protect people from face detection systems that have dissenting political opinions. it's really important for us to be doing outreach to people from all backgrounds, whether it's political, class, subcultural, science, engineering, or artistic. It's important for us to grow our outreach beyond the Transhumanist Party, but at the same time to keep the Transhumanist Party active. So I've been going to nightclubs, I've been going to the Church of Perpetual Life, I've been very active in the Transhumanist Party Facebook group. I've been interviewing people from all over the political spectrum, and a new album of mine just released. It's called Alternative Technology, and it has very heavily based transhumanist themes. I also was just on a podcast called The Stark Truth. The Stark Truth is a transhumanist kind of a vaporwave kind of alternative culture podcast that a friend of mine named Robert produces, and we talked about transhumanism and funding for the transgressive arts. We got into a lot of details about my campaign, and it was a lot of fun. That just happened 2 nights ago, and it should be released any day now. About 3 nights ago, I was on Detonate Nation with Steel Archer. I know a lot of other candidates, and Sultan was on the show. Janati was on it too, and I had a really interesting conversation with Steel about my campaign and the outreach that I had been doing. I talked a little about the controversy that I had been having with fellow candidate Mr. Ben Zion, and just a really good conversation that I had with Steel occurred. I've been loving this outreach because a lot of the other candidates, they've been focusing only within the party, but I've been focusing outside of the party too. I've brought a lot of members in. One of these members is Jessica Clark. She's been modeling the transhuman t-shirts that I've been collaborating with on Transhuman Tees with. Transhuman Tees have been incredible. They've also manufactured this poster that you can see on my wall. We've been designing incredible artwork for the Haywire campaign. I have a great team of video producers, musicians, designers, and Transhuman Tees. They've been very active on my campaign. And Jessica Clark, she was the first model who began modeling for the Haywire campaign and Transhuman Tees. And she just joined the Transhumanist Party. And Jessica Clark began modeling these t-shirts, and she just issued a really touching statement against Jerry Epstein with the recent controversy that unfortunately we've all been dealing with. And people like Jessica, who I met through the occult scene, have now become members of the Transhumanist Party. And people like Jessica, they're very interested in transcendence, transcending human consciousness. They didn't necessarily know about transhumanism before, but they knew about transgression. Artists, musicians, filmmakers, they knew about transgression. They knew about culture. They knew about pushing the limits. Now they know about transhumanism, which is very, very connected to transgression, which is very, very connected to the transgressive arts, which, as you guys know, is a major part of my platform, which I was talking to Robert Stark about a couple nights ago. Funding the transgressive arts. Now, why do we need funding the transgressive arts? So we can make transhumanism creative. So we can make culture about a higher state of human evolution. So we can make human evolution visionary. So we can make a visionary technology a beautiful world in which people's deepest, darkest fantasies can become a reality of virtual fantasy rather than a violent world in which people hurt each other. Imagine if instead of people getting into these violent alt-right versus Antifa street scuffles, they used their imaginations to create virtual worlds in which they expressed their hatred and their anger through simulations of their minds, through art, through music, through photography, and through film, through these new technologies. through funding the transgressive arts, through public education on transhumanism, and through universal basic income, $2,000 a month, reallocating funds, taking nonviolent drug offenders and sex workers out of prison, drastically cutting down on military spending, drastically cutting down on the surveillance state, the NSA, more like the NS, no way. We don't need that. What we need is for our people, our citizens of our great nation to receive a universal basic income. We need to double Andrew Yang's proposal of 1,000, which, while it's a great idea, is not enough to live on. We need $2,000 a month for every citizen in our nation to create an incredible world of transgressive art. We need a greater awareness on neurodiversity. These are my policies. This is not a costume. This is not makeup, as other candidates may have suggested. This is not an act. This is not a shtick. These are my policies. This is what I think the Transhumanist Party needs. And this is what I think we need to do as a party, as a species. This is what I believe evolution is about. This is what I think culture is. And this is what I think transhumanism is about. And I think that in a state of artistic decline, which unfortunately we might be in right now, in this society, our movement, our vanguard, our third party is the place in which we should be enacting these policies. Now, we are more than just a party. We are a revolution, an evolution, if you will, of creators. We are scientists, we are engineers, we are hackers, we are musicians, we are philosophers, we are visionaries. But you know what we are more than that? We are transhumanists. And it is time for us to go beyond left, beyond right, and beyond the center to create a new position. Now, what is that position? That position is evolution. And that evolution is the Transhumanist Party of the United States. And that position of evolution is the presidency of America. And I will defeat Donald Trump with a pirate spaceship because Donald Trump does not understand transgression. Donald Trump does not understand what is going on with our people. He may claim to represent working class interests, but he doesn't understand working class tech. He's never worked as an aspirational CEO in Silicon Valley. He might have done his time in Wall Street, but has he ever worked for a failing tech startup that was funded by a child rapist named Jeffrey Epstein? No, but I did, and it was called Humanity Plus. Now, Donald Trump, he never worked for Humanity Plus, but I did. And let me tell you, that was a corrupt company. And I was just interviewed by the Telegraph about them. And let me tell you, Donald Trump has no idea what it's like to be a working class techie. But I do, and I will defeat him with a pirate spaceship. I have a friend that worked at SpaceX, and we are currently building a blueprint to make this pirate spaceship happen. This isn't some cosplay. This is what we are currently working on. This isn't some little sci-fi fantasy. Transhumanism isn't sci-fi. Transhumanism is what we are working on now. Transhumanism is our party. We are the future of America. We are transhumanists. Thank you for tuning into this debate, everybody. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. Now, you may have noticed you did speak for 10 minutes, and I decided to allow that. I'm going to extend each candidate's introductory remarks to 10 minutes because there may be more to speak about in the campaign update than might fit into 5 minutes. So, candidate Ben Zion, you now have 10 minutes. Please feel free to begin.
Excellent. I'm pleased to give you an update on how the Futurist New Deal is going. And as you know, my candidacy is Poe. Say hello to Poe. My candidacy is centered around a reform ticket called the Futurist New Deal, and that is focusing on near-term policy initiatives for e-governance and some related matters. We published a long-form pamphlet on all of these reforms that we are working at, and it's also focused on economic reforms. Like candidate Haywire, I also have a basic income, and it is about double. That would be about $1 a week for every adult, compared to $500 a week. It would be funded by something initiated by our predecessor, Zoltan Istvan, and that is something called the federal land dividend. And so it would not add to any concerns about taxes or hyperinflation like that of Andrew Yang or Rachel Haywire. But the economic discussions and the policy discussions in the course of this election have been incredible. I commend all of you for making those efforts. I was so pleasantly surprised in seeing the quality of the debates that we've been having on policy matters. I've been able to talk to a lot of people about some other public health initiatives, including some that are being worked on by our Arizona Transhumanist Party. I'm the chair of this party, and our members have been working on public health initiatives. I mentioned this health services initiative and the legal fund for life extension. And, you know, I was talking to some people in other organizations, Humanity Plus, for example, about some of these things. You know, there's a lot of ways to approach these kinds of things, a lot of things we can do. I do not share Rachel's opinion that Humanity Plus is a failing organization. And I don't think the 6,000 life extensionists and techno-optimists on that mailing list are going to share that opinion either. It's one thing to court controversy for controversy's sake. It's quite another thing to attack people who have devoted their lives to techno-optimism. And I was a little taken aback by that, I have to say. In recent weeks, I've had so many great developments with respect to policy matters. Just this morning, it was delayed because because I did it the night before. I sometimes like to turn around these things in the same day. But just this morning, I posted an interview with Estonian emissary for e-governance. His name is Florian Marcus, and it was an incredible interview. I would encourage all of you to check it out. And we talked about a little bit about life extension and public health concerns in this area, but mostly we were focusing on I-voting, the second of the three major points in the Futurist New Deal. And the I-voting is something that Estonia is head and shoulders above other nations in doing. And as a result, Estonia has been able to improve their public health service to such a degree that it came up in our discussion. They are on the verge of being able to use big data breakthroughs and automation and advanced algorithm breakthroughs to move their public health service in the direction of something that is more prevention-based and more life and extensionist friendly. And here in the United States, we haven't done that. We don't really even have a public health service except for specific subsets of the population. And that's quite sad. It's something we need to fix. It is another of the major points of the Futurist New Deal. And, you know, Rachel Haywire a few moments ago made a mention of tragic political violence. Just today, there was a shooting in El Paso, Texas. Rachel Haywire a few moments ago. Hey, that's me. That was fun. Okay, and a tragic event. And I know where Holtzapfel stands on the issue of the assault weapons ban that expired in 2004. I'd like to hear I know where I stand. I've done plenty of press on this subject of gun safety, and I have strong feelings that we need to have a country where children can go to school without having to wear bulletproof backpacks. You know, I've been a hunter in my life. I prefer the bow now, but even so, I I'm not of the mind to think that guns will be snatched up and people will be terrorized by this, but we have to have some standards in this country. Children shouldn't have to live in fear. Parents shouldn't have to lose sleep every night that their child is going to die by doing something so simple as going to school. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy that we have 35,000 gun deaths a year in this country. It's preventable. Most every other nation has something closer to slim to nil gun deaths in the developed world, and we need to be doing better on that. We mentioned a controversy that's been lighting up the internet. The idea that Mr. Epstein is supporting transhumanism and supporting neo-eugenics ideas. We must denounce this most fervently, and I will include my comments in what Gennady has mentioned, a statement against this kind of transhumanism. This is not our kind of transhumanism. Our kind of transhumanism is getting radical life extension and human development initiatives to all the people who would accept them, which is basically everyone. Everyone is effectively one of these de facto life extensionists, I do believe. There's a few isolated communities of people who might prefer to avoid emerging biomedicine as it becomes available, but that's a very small number of people. And that is what transhumanism is about. We have to be better than that. We also have to always be promoting these ideas of life extension, even in the face of these controversies, even in the face of these hellish behaviors. You know, this is something that I agree with very strongly with Rachel Haywire, that decriminalization of sex work will make it so much easier to stop white slavery, sexual slavery. And that is something that we can be doing now with her platform or with the Futurist New Deal. Other kinds of decriminalization are things that we must do. Those things will lead to decreases in violence as well. And so this is absolutely where we are and what we need to be doing. I mentioned Florian Marcus. I spoke to another prominent radical life extension advocate today on the telephone in a pre-interview. The two previous interviews that I did in the day before and hours before the Florian Marcus interview were also with prominent radical life extensionists. That's how it's going to be. I've been doing about 20 interviews a week with people like this to promote this organization and to promote the Futurist New Deal. And through November 2020, that's how it's going to be. And there's a certain momentum to that. And it's something that I hope that you can all recognize and support and consider the Futurist New Deal. We need to be doing better by the people in this country with these economic reforms, with making governance something that is more user-friendly. There's no public will to be doing this in the United States in the way that there is in Estonia. And it's quite incredible what this small country, which was on the verge of economic collapse just a few decades ago, which was a Soviet satellite state, a lot of difficulties there in that transition. And what they chose to do was not allow lobbyists to take absolute control of their government, as is very much the case in the United States, but rather to starting in the early 1990s and beginning in a very real way in 2005, to allow emerging technology to become a central feature of how citizens interact with the state. And as a result, the reports in this country of people's trust of one another, of people's trust of the government, are much higher than the United States. Voter partition rates also about double what they are in the United States in the average election. And this is because these people had the political will to stand up for something as simple as digital democracy, which should be the standard in every single nation. So I ask you to support digital democracy and the futurist New Deal, and support this very lively and very focused campaign for U.S. president. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion, for your introductory remarks. Now we will move to candidate Charles Holsopple. Please provide us a 10-minute update on your campaign since the most recent debate.
Okay, thank you. Well, primarily what I've been doing is through social media, word of mouth, really any way that I talk to people, phone solicitors. If I have their attention, I try to get it immediately, something that provokes their thoughts and their feelings, and get some feedback from it. And I try to present them with a big idea, and that's something that I believe that we need as a nation right now to bridge those divides that we find ourselves in, politically, racially, all of those things that people try to make us on a team, on one side or the other, with really false equivalencies of what those cause and effects are. We're not using critical thinking. We're just caught in an echo chamber. And so we need a big idea, and one that each generation can relate to, one that addresses our existential threats, one that improves our health and our well-being, one that provides us with hope and provides us with dignity, an idea that won't get lost into that echo chamber, and one that gives us confidence in each other regardless of our differences, one that educates based on science and ethical use of our resources, one that affects, and this is very important, our refugee crisis, and what causes those refugees, and what we're going to do with them, both presently, but also in the efforts to build a prosperous and peaceful society. So that the idea is it helps us adapt to the effort, to the effects of the changing climate. So that idea is, for me, Project 222. And that's a nonprofit that I have started about a year and a half ago. And that's what really got me into the Transhumanist Party, not directly, but the project was sponsored by the Institute for Education, Research, and Scholarships out in California, founded by Newton Lee, a transhumanist and, in fact, author of the Transhumanist Handbook. And after working with Newton for about a year, a little over, he had the idea that I should present myself as a potential candidate for the Transhumanist Party. And the reason he did that is because when you overlay the core values of the Transhumanist Party and that of Project 222, and actually the Institute for Education, Research, and Scholarships, when you overlay those values, they are not there. There are no discrepancies. It doesn't contradict each other. So I'll tell you what Project 222 is, and since politicians often repeat themselves, I won't apologize for this, but Project 222 is a declaration that we are all better off when each of us have dignified access within civil society to a minimum of 2 gallons of clean water a day, 2,000 nutritional calories, and 200 cubic feet of secure shelter. Now, it took me 15 years of contemplation and activism as a human rights advocate that in order to come up with that little equation. And I think when it's put on paper and when we look at it as a nation, it's an idea that stimulates and provokes thought. And that's what we need in the Transhumanist Party, is something that says it's memorable, it's different than every other political party. We need a unifying message, and we need a human rights message. And if that human right is to radical life extension, but it's not a responsibility of society. The society needs to provide for those basic needs. I'm all for all of the technologies that advance our existence, but when it comes down to it, I think we have to use an equation that brings up those least among us, as well as fulfills the life and the imagination of those of us that are on the upper edge of the socioeconomic structure. And it's curious the reactions I've received from the people I've talked to. One of the I hadn't thought of, or maybe I hadn't consciously thought of, is what 222 would do to reduce crime. And of course, that's another, you go from reducing crime to the cost savings to the less incarceration. So if people have dignified access to food, water, shelter, they are less likely to commit crime because much of it is in desperation. And it's, people are seen really as, once they lose that dignified access to food, water, shelter, they start living in the streets, which we have 20 million people that are borderline. Many of them are actually in the streets of our cities now. And that is a major issue. And we've got hundreds of thousands, millions of people, internally displaced people all over the world that are suffering from those exact same things. So if we can bring a strong message to the debate, I'm not going to be elected president. I have no expectation of that. But I do want to be able to introduce the transhumanist platform along with 222 as its main messaging to those other platforms, so that we can actually get behind people that are, when I say get behind people, as I said, I'm an activist and have been for 15 years, and I spent months in a tent during the Occupy movement with all walks of life. There were homeless, there were doctors, there were attorneys, a lot of veterans, and they were looking at very real and present dangers to our society. I never heard transhumanists, but they would, most of them would be transhumanists because they want to use technology to radically extend the lives of those that are in the streets that may be suffering from malnutrition and can't contribute back to society. Anyway, a lot of good thinking people and a lot of educated people. So through that activism and then tying that with the Transhumanist Party, I think we can make a strong message that does go beyond this transhumanist primary. And one of the ideas I had is, when we go to rallies, if we can get our message out, and if we can talk to those people like I've talked to in the street that say, yes, it seems reasonable and it seems feasible that we as a society can do that we have the technology and we have the resources, that if that was a mission, that we could provide food, water, and shelter on those base minimums at least to the global population. Now, I'm not a scientist. Maybe that's not true, but if that's not true, we have to come to realize that. I personally think that it's true. We can do whatever our imagination allows, and if our imagination is based in science and available technology, it's not something that we can pretend to do. It's something that we have to make the tough choices in order that we redevelop our economy to one of peace and prosperity based on those common needs of the population. So, as I say, I've been preaching high and low. Don't want to use that word preaching, I guess, but I've been consulting people high and low at different universities, and I've reached out. We've been able to get members in Cameroon and Ghana, throughout Africa, and many countries in Asia, of people that are familiar, and many listening now, that say, we in underdeveloped countries, or in areas that we've had climate change impact, we see a very clear path to 222, because that we've been deprived it either all of our lives or because of some natural disaster. And I think all of us here in the United States can start to relate, whether by flood or storms, fires, all of the the changes that we are experiencing, all of the catastrophes and the displacement of populations across the United States, we need to address, and we need a plan to do that. And using 222 within the Sustainable Development Goals and within our internal national emergency response within FEMA, we're using similar numbers. So it's relatable to those that are doing the work, and it's relatable to those that want to finance the work and give their philanthropic dollars and their compassion to help others. 222 is one, it's catchy, and two, it is a common denominator in what it takes to sustain life. And we can argue that within the eminent domain for those materials, technologies that should not be privately or corporately held, that impede the flow of food, water, and shelter to the global population in minimum amounts. First, we must take care of those most in need, and then we could advance all the wonderful aspects of transhumanism, and we can promote it. But we need a message that grabs the attention of the electorate, whether it be Republican or Democrat. And these people that I've talked into in the street, whether they be homeless, whether they be doctors or lawyers, or I wish I could talk to some Indian chiefs, but they have all given positive response. And I hope to better articulate the message and gain the cooperation and the advice and counsel of those more educated than I in how to actually implement that. And that's the beginning of a cabinet, or at least a shadow cabinet. And I'm not familiar with the total membership of the Transhumanist Party, but I know it's relatively small now, and we need to grow it so that we can actually have an impact in the local elections and hopefully next year's presidential election. I'd like to do as good a job as I can to promote transhumanism this year, without the expectation of being president. But if I were, I would pledge to do the best that I can the same way and defend the country from enemies, both foreign and domestic, the same as I did when the oath that I took in 1972 into the U.S. Army. So I don't know if that's my 10 minutes, but I'll yield my time to answer questions.
All right, thank you, Candidate Holsopple. You spoke for 12 minutes and 30 seconds, and we will adjust your time accordingly for some of the subsequent questions. But we do appreciate your overview and your introductory remarks. And that was the easy part of the debate, ladies and gentlemen. Now we will move on to the more challenging part of the debate, where for each candidate, I have developed 6 questions that are specifically intended for that individual candidate, addressing some of that candidate's history, positions, statements, and actions. Some of these are more along the lines of clarifying questions in order to have our membership be better informed about what the candidate actually believes. Some of these questions are about certain controversies that the candidates have been involved in. And I would suggest that this is an opportunity for our candidates to also set the record straight. If they believe that a certain version of a particular narrative is correct, if they believe they need to bring certain facts to the forefront of our members' attention, this is their opportunity to do so. Now, the modus operandi that I've adopted here is that I do not shy away from controversy, but I do think that sunlight is the best disinfectant. So by airing these issues in a civil, public, structured forum, we can hopefully resolve them, get to at least an approximation of the truth, and give the public a good amount of information for them to make up their minds. So with that, because of the speaking order that we determined, our first question will go to candidate Rachel Haywire. Candidate Haywire, one of your stated positions supports, quote, restrictions on imperialist global trade. What kinds of restrictions and what extent of restrictions would you advocate? Do you view all global trade negatively, or are there only particular kinds of trade that you would consider imperialist in nature? And for each of these questions, there are 3 minutes allotted. You don't have to spend the entirety of the 3 minutes. If you do not, that time can be saved for subsequent interactions. So candidate Haywire, please proceed.
First and foremost, trade with China. There's way too much of it going on. They've taken our patents. They have a surveillance state that is absolutely horrific. We need to drastically cut down on trade with China. Just because they have cheap technological goods does not mean we should be doing business with them. There are plenty of other countries that are manufacturing efficient technology that we could be trading with instead. Not to mention that there are plenty of American tech workers that are manufacturing technology right here on our own soil. We need to be closing the trade to China loop drastically. I think that we should be doing trading here at home as much as we possibly can. So while I wouldn't cut down on all imperialistic trade, I would like to cut down on most of it. Most global trade is imperialistic in nature because we are doing it by force. We are conquering other countries and their resources and using this kind of American globalistic attitude in order to use other resources in the name of humanism and progress. But we're really doing is hurting working class Americans and their employment opportunities, their jobs, their liberty on our own soil in the name of humanism. It's a very backhand. A lot of progressives and liberals in America fall for it, or they're afraid of going against the politically correct narrative because they don't want to be seen as racist. But fact is, there is absolutely nothing racist about advocating for doing trade here in America. There is nothing racist or homophobic or Nazi. And for the record, I'm Jewish. So if you call me Nazi, you're absolutely insane. There is nothing racist or Nazi about advocating to do trade here in America. The fact is that a lot of global trade is imperialistic. We're taking other countries, we're importing their goods, claiming that they are our own goods. We're having sweatshop factories, not only overseas, but here in America. We're importing them here. We're paying them $2 an hour to manufacture cheap goods, selling them to high-end tech companies, and then putting our American flag over their cheap goods in the name of progress. This is absolutely corrupt and imperialistic. I think that we need to restrict it with a capital R, rated R for restriction. Let's not do that anymore. China, how about China? How about China? You have got to go. Bye-bye. Don't like it.
All right, thank you, candidate Haywire. And I will add 10 seconds to your time for subsequent questions. The next question will go to candidate Ben Zion. The question is, some of your comments during your most recent July 30th, 2019 interview with Steele Archer suggest that you consider an emphasis on the rights of future sentient entities, including artificial general intelligences, to be misplaced. Could you clarify this position and furthermore, explain how you view documents such as the Transhumanist Bill of Rights, which focuses on broadening the applicability of rights to such sentient entities that may be encountered or developed in the coming decades? Candidate Ben Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Yes. Well, this is largely an order of importance question. I feel that some kinds of problems have derived from a focus on, or lack of focus on regulating certain areas with advanced algorithms that have the appearance of being something like artificial persons. You know, we think of Cambridge Analytica and any number of influence operations which this is a part of what they were doing. This kind of manipulation is a more likely near-term outcome than artificial personhood in the next 15 years. So we're going to see an acceleration of that kind of manipulation. But in due time, I do believe that we have prospects for artificial personhood, just in the way that I think we have prospects for uplifting of creatures. You know, Poe here, he's not signed up for a life extension yet, but I think that some of those things are in the cards for all of us. And you know, life extension is, of course, a separate matter from uplifting of creatures or artificial personhood. But these prospects are good. And I do not feel that the references to this in the charter documents should be removed. And I've said as much in other interviews as well, only just in the way that maybe candidate Holtzapfel a few moments ago made mention of radical life extension being an important goal, but humane economic policies and similar approaches to ending human misery being higher on the list. And I think that we'll see some concerns along those lines with advanced algorithms, where Google or far more unscrupulous servers than Google can host many hundreds of millions of artificial personalities and absolutely glut the market in the marketplace of ideas with their own corporatist agenda. That's something that we have to watch out for. That's not 40 years away. That's going on now, and it's going to continue in larger and larger number as we're as we move on. So we need to be thinking about that. I think that's a higher policy concern, but no, I wouldn't change that language.
All right. Thank you, candidate Ben Zion, and we are going to add 40 seconds to your time for subsequent questions.
Woo!
Now, we are going to move on to candidate Holsopple. You noted both during this debate and during the previous debate, as well as in a subsequent interview with Steele Archer, that you are a relative newcomer to transhumanism and the Transhumanist Party, having been introduced to them by Newton Lee within the most recent year. What would you say qualifies you to be a prominent spokesperson for the transhumanist community, and what would you do to effectively communicate transhumanist ideas to the general public? Candidate Holsopple, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, when I say I've been active in the Transhumanist Party and really just aware of the Transhumanist Party, I've lived my life in many ways right in line with the transhumanist core ideals. And so when I did see the Transhumanist Party and said, okay, well, let's face it, 1 out of 10,000 know about the Transhumanist Party or something in those numbers. So we have a huge gap to fill in. Who knows they're a transhumanist, the same as I found out that the transhumanism is very much in line with my ideals. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that I am the author of Project 222, and that fits together. So I'm going to leave it to the viewer and to the people that are going to hear about the Transhumanist Party and going to hear about 222, whether I'm going to be a good leader or not. But what I did say is that I want 222 to go beyond. And what's happened just from this exercise is that anybody that looks at this election campaign will understand 222 a little bit better and decide whether or not that's something that they agree with, and at the same time whether they agree with the core values of the Transhumanist Party. And I think we'll get some good results from that and grow the party. I know our goal is 10,000, as you have stated, that we can reach some form of just getting over the edge, and then hopefully go exponential from there to make a difference in the political conversation and the scientific conversation and really the global conversation on what's important and what we need to do and how we need to do it. And I'm going to rely on the transhumanists, whether they be a registered transhumanist or just a unknown transhumanist that they just haven't heard the word yet. And I'll do what I can to spread the word.
All right. Thank you, candidate Holsopple. We are going to add 45 seconds to your time for subsequent questions. And now we return to candidate Haywire for your next question. You currently have an active GoFundMe campaign entitled Exposing Corruption in Silicon Valley. In fact, you just posted an update about that yesterday to your Facebook profile. In the description, you write, quote, "I'm going to write a memoir about my personal experiences in Silicon Valley involving several transhumanist startups and think tanks. I will discuss the good, bad, and ugly as I expose the corruption at its very core. I will name the key players that are keeping life extension technology at the hands of the rich." So tell us about to write such a memoir. Have they evolved in any way since you originally started this project? And if you do intend to write this memoir, do you believe that there is an actual conspiracy to keep life extension technology limited to a small wealthy elite? Candidate Haywire, you may begin.
Yes, it's actually not a conspiracy because it's out in the open now. I mean, a lot of people have come to me and they've told me that they have been denied cryopreservations by Max Moore, the CEO of Alcor. So this is out in the open and it's not a conspiracy. They were told that they didn't have enough money, so they couldn't get cryopreservation. I advocate for legal protections for cryonics patients. It's part of my platform. The book, it's going to be entertaining. You know, it's going to talk about a lot of my experiences in Silicon Valley as a working class founder and an artist. I do plan to name people involved. One of those organizations is Humanity Plus, who was just revealed to be taking over $100,000 from Jerry Epstein, the child rapist. I recall Ben Zion was just talking about how he was talking to them and working with them about 20 minutes ago. He was saying that he'd been communicating with them. Now, I don't know if I would be communicating with an organization that was taking over $100,000 from a child rapist. That's just me. But yeah, the GoFundMe, it's not huge right now, but I've raised over $500 for it. I've gotten a good agent to help me get the book out there. I've written 4 chapters for it. I've been doing a lot of investigative research. People on the inside have been coming to me and telling me their stories. And I think it's going to be really entertaining to a lot of people, and it's going to reveal a lot of information. I think it's time for we the people to take transhumanism back into our own hands and to create a better transhumanism, to make life extension accessible to everybody, regardless of their economic status. And I think that as people begin to become aware of these stories of corruption, that transhumanism is going to become more accessible, that it's not going to be in the hands of a few wealthy people. It's not a conspiracy. I mean, this is known. I've talked about it. I was on a show called The Rundown Live, in which I discussed these things. I outed Humanity Plus before they made the news, before everybody was talking about this child rapist. I had outed the organization. So yeah, but there's no conspiracy. It's just what actually happened. This is public knowledge, and I'm happy to talk about it. But the book, it's not just about that. I'm also going to talk about a lot of the parties that I went to. I'm going to talk about the rationalist community, cryptocurrency. I'm going to talk about a lot of the more interesting things that happened, a lot of the friends that I made, a lot of the ideas about AI. I think it's going to be an entertaining book, and I hope that you all read it. I think you guys are going to have a good time reading my book.
Thank you, Candidate Haywire, and you did speak for exactly 3 minutes. So now we will proceed to Candidate Ben Zion. Now, Candidate Ben Zion, you have many posts on your social media profiles which are highly critical or derisive of Donald Trump. Do you consider the Trump administration to be opposed or antithetical to the goals of transhumanism, or does it have some areas of compatibility? Moreover, do you perceive any equivalent threat or concern arising from some hard party line Democrats who wish to defeat Trump at all costs and have fallen into the mentality that anyone who does not vote capital D Democratic is an enemy? Candidate Ben Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, that brings to mind a sort of a Russiagate red herring. You know, so a lot of concerns there, but people are using it as a partisan talking point. No, I don't imagine that Donald Trump is an enemy of transhumanists. I think he's an enemy of humane domestic economic policy and pro-worker initiatives, and a sound business policy on the world stage, Rachel Haywire mentioned ending the trade with China, escalating this trade war. 150,000 people have lost jobs just due to steel tariffs imposed by Donald Trump alone. Those effects cascade out into other industries. Other industries have more or less been wiped off the map because of this trade war. This is a child's idea of how business is done in a post-industrial framework. And I would also say about this Epstein concern. A lot of people get donations from people. That doesn't mean that they know who they were from. It doesn't mean there's a lot of weirdness going on here. It reminds me of kind of a right of return discussions on people on the hard right as it relates to some senator or congressman who could claim Israeli citizenship. Those guys didn't actually do that. Those guys are just making a red herring up. And I think that's what's going on here with Humanity Plus. And also, you seriously attacking Humanity Plus? That's 80% of our base right there. That's a 6,000 people mailing list. You're going to just attack them because of something that's going to be in the news cycle for another 72 hours? I don't understand that at all. But yes, Donald Trump is not uniformly a boogeyman. He's done some things. I was talking to a gentleman today in a pre-interview, and we talked about right to try legislation. We need things well beyond this. We need right to try legislation that this administration has forwarded for everyone in the interest of radical life extension. That is my main campaign goal. And all of the Futurist New Deal initiatives are structured around moving us into a society that can achieve that goal. I'll defer the remainder of my time.
Yes, thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You have gained another 40 seconds. And now we will move to candidate Holtzapfel. You already described the main emphasis of Project 222 and its pursuit of giving access to everyone to a minimum of 2 gallons of fresh water, 2,000 nutritional calories, and 200 cubic feet of secure shelter. However, most of the residents of the United States already have access to these basic necessities, as well as many goods and amenities beyond those necessities. And these are the people who comprise the vast majority of the voting population as well. What would your platform and your campaign have to offer to those individuals who already have the 222 goals fulfilled, but who still face various other problems in their lives, including the problems that only future technological progress can resolve, like death and various diseases of aging?
Well, that's exactly right. So it's not a singular campaign, but one that, yes, most people do have it's clean water, food, and shelter. There are hundreds of thousands living in the street that don't. They're nowhere to use the toilet. There's nowhere to bathe or nowhere to find shelter. So, and I've lived empathetically with the people in the street in Berkeley for a while, and it's not something that has an easy exit. And the more you get into it, the worse it is. And what I've noticed is there is a lot of empathy within the general population for those people. They recognize that with a stroke of bad luck, that they could be in that street. So they want security. So it's not just bringing aid to those that are currently in need of it. It's implementing different systems that can be developed to create a redundancy that ensures the security of the population, both with and without those elements at this point. And there's a lot of philanthropy that wants to just help. And there's also a lot of industry that wants to invest. And if we build an economy based around the provision of these basic needs that protects the environment, that protects the rights of workers, that protects the rights of both those with and those without, we can get a message. Now, working out the details of exactly how that works on the mind, there are psychiatrists and psychologists. There's all of the stimulus that gives us thought, intention, and fear in that echo chamber. It needs to be dissected by something that we can see as an individual and as a society, something that we can trust, some fabric of existence beyond just getting in the car, getting gas, trying to get it, going to work, coming home, and trying to raise our kids, and really not ever getting on top of society. So though that the vast majority of the population has dignified access to food, water, and shelter, they're concerned about their water all over the nation and that water supply. We're concerned about our food supply and the nutrition and what we can buy at the grocery store and how nutritious it is and what effects it has, whether it be, and we have to rely on science in order to identify what best actions we can do as individuals that are in a power to help to help redirect all of our tax dollars and our consumer dollars to a more sound investment. Right now, we're consume. Fortunately, we're getting a handle. There's more information coming out on what our oceans are dealing with plastics and microplastics, how that's getting into our body. So the idea of clean water, just as Rachel's taking a swig now, we need to know where that came from and how it affects our body, and to use science and our technology to do that. It's a bigger picture than just those that we can obviously see. And there's a big percentage that have food, water, and shelter that don't have dignified access to it, that they're abused at their jobs, they're abused in their domestic relationship. And so though that food, water, and shelter is on the surface available to all, dignified access to food, water, and shelter it demands and a daily grind for a large segment of the population. And that basic need costs the individual taxpayer in healthcare, in military expenditures. So the best job we can do in getting food, water, and shelter and basic minimums, both within our borders and without, the better our security will be. And at the end, we're all seeking a sense of security, and we can do a better job as a government, and that's what I would advocate for.
Thank you, Candidate Holsopple. You spoke for 5 minutes, so that does subtract 2 minutes from your time, but we will proceed now to the third question for Candidate Haywire. Candidate Haywire, in various interviews, including with Robert Stark and Justin Murphy in 2019, you discussed the concept of so-called national futurism, which you also wrote about in your 2015 book, The New Reaction. Could you please explain what you mean by national futurism? How is it different from nationalism? And do you believe national futurism to be compatible with transhumanism? And if so, how? Candidate Haywire, you have 3 minutes.
National futurism is the next step of transhumanism. It is a DIY nationalism in which we can create occult imperiums of our mind through technology. National futurism is nationalism without the statist materialism. It is a higher level of occult technology. You know, frankly, I'm bored with all this respectability in the Transhumanist Party, all of this curtailing to the mainstream. You know what? People think that we're all a bunch of fringe lunatics. It doesn't matter if we're Boris Zion or Charles Popsicle or Gennady, what's your last name again? People think that we're all crazy, okay? People think that we're all a bunch of fringe lunatics. I mean, I'm Rachel Haywire. So why don't we stop being concerned with respectability and focus on what matters? The new art right. Rachel Haywire, national futurism, culture. Yes, I wrote a book called The New Reaction, and it was later called The New Art Right. And I wrote a chapter called National Futurism. I did. I take nothing back.
I apologize for nothing. I don't believe in the prestige economy. I believe in a higher stage of humanity. In fact, that's why I'm running for president, because we need to make politics entertaining again. And we need to make politics fun again. And I'm sorry if people had a problem with me calling China imperialistic just because I was wearing headphones that might have been manufactured in China. I'm sorry if you guys think I'm a hypocrite because I said some things about China that might have upset your third position about China being really cool for some upcoming national Bolshevik tech war. Sorry, you know, national Bolsheviks, sorry if I upset your far left, far right sensibilities, but you know what? The Transhumanist Party is kind of boring right now, and we need to make it more fun, okay? National Futurists of the World, unite. Fact is, I'm the only candidate in this entire boring party, excuse me, Humanity Plus and your child rapist vendors, that's going to make transhumanism popular again. That's just reality. And you can say that I'm arrogant, you can make fun of my costumes, but I'm going to make transhumanism cool again. I'm going to make transhumanism fun again, and I am going to take you guys for a ride on my pirate spaceship into infinity, and we are going to build national futurist universes of the soul, okay? We are going to create a new art right, and it is going to be incredible. Our spiritual insurrection is going to lead the next stage of transhumanist evolution. Go beyond the center with me. Forget about respectability politics. Enjoy this new dark bohemia. Rachel Haywire is the new evolution. Thank you, citizens.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. Now, you did spend the 10 seconds you had previously accumulated, so your balance of time is essentially at the default levels now. The next question will go to candidate Ben Zion. How do you plan to bridge some of the ideological divides in the transhumanist movement, specifically around economic theory and policy, where transhumanists have a wide variety of perspectives and many disagreements?
Well, not with speeches like that. I could make a deep fake of Jim Jones's face over that, and I don't know that I could tell the difference. You know, you said, Rachel Haywire, you said that you don't take anything back, but you changed the title of that book so it wouldn't sound like you're a neo-fascist. Some of that sounded awful lot like neo-fascist talking points. Yeah, there is a lot of diversity in this party, and we should respect that. The marketplace of ideas can support this level of discourse, and it's why you know, in crafting the futurist New Deal, we opted to not be describing a marginal tax rate dramatically higher than that that exists. This whole program was created with this diversity in mind. So I don't think that this is as dangerous of a thing as you might suppose. I will also say that we have lost our true north in founder Zoltan Istvan, because he was such a staunch advocate for life extension. And in crafting this campaign, the Futurist New Deal, we considered making it an emulation of his campaign on that one particular, focusing on radical life extension. We opted not to do that in this way, but I cannot say enough how important this public health outcome is. And to candidate Holtzapfel, he mentioned that we have to focus on other matters before we can become a civilization that focuses on life extension. I think that that focus in and of itself will bring out humane outcomes. We have a society that doesn't value human life. You know, 55% of workers in this country are working in service jobs, and their wages are artificially low. They're working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and their housing costs are kept artificially high. There's a lot of ways that we can be improving upon that. And domestically, I think that the Futurist New Deal basic income is the best approach. Zarin asks, if we could explain this land tax a little more. Yes, as you may know, these public lands are held in great number, and 85% of them are not national parks, and we could be leasing out those 85% to carbon neutral companies and a whole lot of other organizations, as long as they are able to stipulate to a certain set of conditions, being carbon neutral and having a certain design aesthetic. And in doing so, we could raise $173 trillion in 10 years, enough to fund a basic income without offending the sensibilities of these people who don't want to see significant added costs to our system, as Rachel Haywire's basic income would add. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You spoke for 3 minutes and 10 seconds, so a slight subtraction from your subsequent time, but you had accumulated some time before that as well. So now we move on to candidate Charles Holsopple. Candidate Holsopple, what technological advancements would you advocate as part of reaching the 222 goals? And in what ways would those technologies enable large numbers of people to reach much higher standards of living than the 222 baseline? Candidate Holsopple, you have 3 minutes.
Well, let me take 10 seconds. Would you repeat that? There was some rustling that I could not hear a few of those words. So
yes. So what technological advancements would you advocate as part of reaching the 222 goals? And in what ways could those technologies enable large numbers of people to reach much higher standards of living than the 222 baseline?
Well, you know, what I have done is taken the approach that I do not know the answers to the questions that I'm asking, but I do have confidence in the scientific community that candidate methodologies would put forward, and they would be different for many different locations. So the ideas that the hundreds of thousands of non-government organizations and the government organizations that are spending our money, they know these problems, they've identified the problems, they just haven't put them into the algorithm of 222. So what I would do, particularly if I were president, I would have a ball, because I would have a top security clearance and above. So I would have information on what technologies are currently being restricted. What I would ask to what patents and intellectual properties are being protected that are actually harmful to the general population. So as far as looking at those technologies, what I would do is not go penalize the corporations, but give those corporations the opportunity to reinvest in knowledge-based transformation of their industry. And I would encourage that in every industry as we face these looming existential threats. So looking out too far, I think really takes our eyes off the ball. We have to assume that what we're accomplishing today is something that we're going to need to take with us forever. And we have to get down to those basic needs, and using those technologies for water purification. I don't know, do we put 50 ships a day, mega tankers up to the melting ice and bring it back instead of oil? And have industries built upon these new resources and technologies. The fortification of food crops through natural selection, drought-tolerant crops, putting people to work planting forests and maintaining those forests, and giving them give them an education on what unit of work is required. In coming years, less unit of work is going to be required per calorie, right? I mean, if we use technology, there will be less work required. So the shelter concept, back to your original question, is that's how I got into this and got into activism. I came out of the commodity lumber business, where homes are built stick by stick, stone by stone. And I came up with an inflatable idea that could be rigidized and made into permanent settlements. And I took that to scientists, and they wanted to move with it, but they did not have the funding. So those are some of the technologies: advanced building techniques, food fortification, and different water accessing technologies.
Thank you, candidate Holtzapfel. You've spoken for 3 minutes and 15 seconds. So I think at this point, we will proceed to the next question for candidate Haywire. Candidate Haywire, in your 2018 book, The New Art Right, which, as I understand, is a second expanded, enhanced edition of the New Reaction, as well as in various other writings, you refer to an aristocracy of artists, or so-called aristocrats of the spirit. Could you please elaborate on this concept and discuss who these aristocrats are or would be, and what would be their role in the society you envision? Candidate Haywire, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, I'd love to. Well, first and foremost, it's people that aren't into the respectability politics that the mainstream Transhumanist Party is so focused on. Frankly, I'm disgusted by this appeal to prestige and respectability that has been going on in these debates. I mean, like I said before, we're all seen as a bunch of lunatics, so stop trying so hard to be respectable. People think we're crazy. Anyway, what are these aristocrats of the spirit that people like me and philosophers like Evola have been talking about? We're the new art right. We are beyond class. We are a new class of artists. We are not lower class, working class, middle class, upper class. We are a higher class of artists that transcend the notion of economic class. We are a higher class of the mind, a higher state of consciousness. We belong to a new spiritual vanguard. This spiritual vanguard is in line with transhumanism. We are transgressive artists that belong to a higher spiritual prototype. And through funding the transgressive arts, we can create technology that ushers in this post-Marxist, post-class ideology. So we can create a virtual kingdom of technology in which we can reign, because frankly, hierarchy is backwards now. We have people at the bottom, at the top, people at the top, at the bottom. We have these respectable bureaucrats running things when you know what they should be running downward. We should replace them with robots. I mean, how are they different from robots? They're just reading a script. You know what that script should be? Run by actual robots. I mean, who are the real aristocrats? The artists. We don't run by a script. We run by our own decisions. We run by our own choices. We have autonomy. We are the aristocrats of the soul. And that is what we are. We are the vanguard. We are the Haywire vanguard. And when we fund the transgressive arts, and no, this is not neo-fascism. Neo-fascism, Mr. Zion, is the bureaucracy that you are enforcing as you support taking money from a child rapist, okay? That is neo-fascism, child rape. What I'm talking about is art, okay? There is nothing fascist about art. Art is beauty. Art is creation. And aristocracy is what I am advocating for, going beyond class, as Charles talks about, going beyond poverty and creating a beautiful kingdom of visionary technology. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for exactly 3 minutes. And now we proceed to candidate Ben Zion. Your fourth question is this. You have previously posted on Facebook in response to Democratic Party sympathizers that if you receive the Transhumanist Party nomination, you intend to campaign until August 2020, at which time you plan to endorse a Democratic candidate. However, one of the commitments that each Transhumanist Party primary candidate was asked to make in completing the Declaration of Interest form was that if the candidate won the nomination, the candidate would run for office as a USTP-endorsed independent candidate until Election Day 2020, which is November 3rd, 2020. The form also notes that, quote, this commitment requires that during the time prior to Election Day 2020, the USTP-endorsed candidate shall not concede to or endorse another candidate from another political party. The USTP endorsed candidate also shall not run on behalf of any other political party. In light of this, have you reconsidered your outlook regarding the endorsement of a Democratic candidate prior to Election Day 2020? Candidate Ben Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Well, Rachel Haywire and I have both endorsed Andrew Yang in a variety of ways. That doesn't mean that we're going to be throwing a monetary or organizational support to those operations. So no, that endorsement that you alluded to is nothing of the kind that you described. We have a responsibility to grow this organization, and we've all been working to those ends. There's honestly, I think that attacking Humanity Plus is a big strategic error. Whatever you may think about that organization today, they're not going anywhere. That's a huge mailing list. It's, half of the people who are going to vote in this election are on that mailing list. I'm never going to endorse somebody like Epstein. It's a good thing that such people are in jail. It's a good thing that sexual slavery and the maltreatment of children is being discussed more as a result of this. We cannot have an overclass who is immune from prosecution as we do today in the oligarchy states of America. And this is a discussion that's being advanced very much by this. Somebody donating money to you. I mean, how many donors do you have, Rachel? Are you vetting them all before they send you money? That's not a realistic prospect.
Am I allowed to answer that, or?
Candidate
Sure, I defer the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Very, very well. So candidate Haywire, candidate Ben Zion just gave you 1 minute and 20 seconds to answer that.
Sure. I have a fair amount of donors. I'm not going to be answering that question right now because that's a personal issue. And I would like to say that I have a lot more donors than he does because I have a Haywire.
Well, let's just jack the conversation because you don't want to answer the question.
And he does not have his own website up because he doesn't have anything up except for a bunch of crappy videos.
We have a number of websites up.
Nobody has watched your videos. I have a haywire2020.com website. You have a bunch of videos up that nobody has watched. And also, I would like to say that I would like to vote for your dog, but I would not like to vote for you because you are boring. BORING.
All right,
You boring, bitch. You boring.
Okay. All right. Let's go. Let's just have a lot of schizophrenic talk for the rest of the time. Why not?
All right.
Boring.
That is enough for this segment. We will now proceed to candidate Holtzapfel. Candidate Holtzapfel, the next question for you is this. You have stated that you think that the life extension goals will most likely be reached based on their current funding, whereas the 222 goals require more active effort. However, many prominent scientists pursuing life extension goals, such as Bill Andrews and Aubrey de Grey, have frequently emphasized that lack of funding is their primary limitation to the rate of progress in their field. If you are nominated by the Transhumanist Party, what measures would you advocate to remedy this lack of funding situation?
Well, I would put priority on life. And those lives that are around today, and the ones that are coming, that is just going to be a natural course. We're going to continue to bear more children, and that's a certainty. Otherwise, all bets are off. But the technology to radically extend those lives on the planet now would, in my campaign, take a lesser priority to those that are actually suffering basic lack of the essential elements of food, water, and shelter. It's a priority system. It's not that I would defund the technological advancements that are possible and seem reasonable and feasible that deserve funding, because it can help all of the people that are alive today. The one technology and one discovery doesn't just impact the reason for the scientist that is trying to solve a particular problem. Often it goes throughout the economy and is to the benefit of all. So I recognize that, but my first priority is the basic dignified access to food, water, and shelter to all the people.
Thank you, candidate Holtzapfel. And you
I would like to say, for whatever reason, my phone keeps draining. So if you lose me, I totally apologize.
Yes, that's no problem, candidate Holtzapfel. And if we lose you, we'll try to find a way to reconnect you. You have regained 1 minute and 30 seconds of time in your answer to this question. And now we proceed to the next question for candidate Haywire. I think you could have expected that this one was coming. I deliberately left it open-ended. What are your views regarding the alt-right?
I think that we need an alt-right because the alt-right is boring and stupid and violent, and we don't need people like that in our country. What we need is an alt-right where people are creative and self-expressive. That's why I changed the title of my book to the alt-right. I'm reading in the YouTube, we don't need a candidate without self-control. I fully agree with that. Just to be clear, before I was being performative because I think that we need entertainment in our party. We need to entertain people. I think that politics and entertainment are very important. We need culture, we need art, we need film, transgressive art. Self-control is very important. The alt-right has no self-control. Now, the alt-right, we can control it by having funding. The alt-right is something that we need to work to optimize through creating an alternative to the alt-right, through self-expression, through creativity. We can work to channel the dissent of the angry working class to build an alternative to the alt-right in which self-expression is not harmful. And I'm very big on this. As somebody who was attacked for being Jewish from people on the alt-right, they attacked my website, trigger warning, when I founded it 5 years ago. It was very, very horrific for me. I have had very negative experiences with those people, and that's, when it came to me, we need to create an alternative, and that's where I came up with the idea for the alt-right, and that's where I decided, we need to stop this violence from occurring. So transgressive art funding is very important to me. UBI, I'm very big on public education, on transhumanism. I personally had people come to me, they said, Rachel, I used to be a neo-Nazi. I'm not making this up. I didn't even produce blogs. And when I saw how people on the alt-right were treating you, I decided I didn't want to be a part of that community anymore. I'd much rather be a part of what you're doing. I think that you're a cool person, and I don't like how these anti-Semitic people are. I don't support this type of rhetoric. I really like your writing. And now that those people are no longer involved in the alt-right, now they're involved in the alt-right, and I'm very happy about that. I have no problem with people getting away from the alt-right and becoming a part of the alt-right. In fact, I love to see that kind of thing happen, and I encourage everybody that's watching this that has people that they know that might be involved in the alt-right to tell them to read my book, tell them to pick up a copy of the new alt-right. There is an alternative to the alt-right. You can be angry, you can be working class, you can be sick of what's going on with political correctness and not be a racist, anti-Semitic shitlord.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for exactly 3 minutes. Now, candidate Ben Zion, the next question goes to you. What is the Ben Zion Institute and what does it do? Candidate Ben Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, sure. So the Ben Zion Institute is the name of my influence operation, which is connected to about 25,000 people. And it was in the process of rebranding as we speak and before this. And Rachel Haywire pointed out how her videos are so popular. She's made a couple of videos. My reach is significantly higher. She thinks says a lot of things about how she's bringing all of this. Look at if you search hashtags around this party, and you can get a pretty clear idea of who's going outside of the echo chamber. Charles Holsopple is doing a great job with that. Not only is Rachel Haywire not doing as good of a job of that, in my opinion, but also attacking people like Natasha Vitamour and Max Moore in a debate of this kind. It's not just being somebody who is Jesus. It's not just being somebody who is colorful. This is chaos, as Rachel Haywire said at the beginning. To no real end. And we have to kind of, in everything that we do along these lines, we have to be advancing people's discussions and being provocative, not just attacking people who have supported this organization from its inception.
Thank you, Candidate Ben Zion, and we will have another minute and 30 seconds added to your time. And now we proceed to Candidate Holsopple. Candidate Holsopple, if you are nominated, how will you ensure that the transhumanist message is prominently advocated alongside the 222 message? You have 3 minutes.
Well, we're back again to the similarity of the core value. And though I am new to transhumanism, every step of the way, and every person that I have talked about transhumanism with, they first go, what? And then they go, oh yeah, I believe in that. So transhumanism would actually benefit 222, and 222 would benefit transhumanism. I certainly don't see a conflict, and I do see the discussion, the big idea, bringing in the Transhumanist Party. And as again, the chances of me being, well, you didn't say elected to president, you meant receive the nomination, I suppose. Those would be two different things. But yeah, I see the messages being very, very much aligned. There's no conflict. And one hand washes the other in this regard. It's two different perspectives on the same thing. And the more people that we can bring into the party, the more that discussion enriches and identifies those common threads within the party. So I would reach out to those scientists, those within the party, those that are better at politics than I within the party, to present their case, offer criticisms. I'm not going to be anybody else. I'm not going to become super educated or I'm not going to change much. And what I do have is I have a passion for justice. I have a passion for truth. And if those things are, if those perspectives are carried on, those values are carried on, then the Transhumanist Party would be very well represented, I feel.
Yes, thank you, Candidate Holsopple. You spoke for 2 minutes, so you have regained a minute of time. And now we proceed to the 6th and final prepared question for Candidate Haywire. Candidate Haywire, you have stated publicly before that you have been the victim of a cyber stalker for about 15 years, and that this individual published false information about you that remains online. What can you tell our viewers about this to enable them to distinguish the truth from the falsehood? And furthermore, how does this unfortunate experience inform your views on ways to combat cyberbullying and online harassment?
Thank you for asking me that. Unfortunately, in the comments, people are saying that I'm easily triggered and that I'm always making myself out to be a victim. I find that to be unfortunate, because what I've been seeing is that Zion has been making himself out to be a victim. He's been posting maybe like 12 comments in a row on the Facebook group nonstop, complaining about how he's been attacked by me because of alleged bikini photos of me that don't exist. Meanwhile, he's been posting comments from my stalker, who was arrested many years ago. And what I want to say is, yes, I was a victim of a stalker, but I do what I can to not let that affect me to this day. You know, I'm living a fulfilling life. I'm working on music. I'm working on writing. I'm working on running for president. I think that we do need to create new initiatives to stop cyber stalking from affecting people. And I think that other victims of cyber stalking should be speaking out and making sure that this kind of thing does not happen to people again. But most of all, we should make sure that we do not take
the lies of cyber stalkers seriously, and that we do not spread their information as fact, like candidates like Ben Zion do. We need to make sure that documented cyber stalkers who have court records on them are not used as political tools, and that we don't take their information and spread it publicly. If you are a victim of cyber stalking, I just want you to know that you can come to me and that you're welcome to lean on me for support if you would like to talk about it. You know, people are saying, here we go, she's making herself out to be a victim. You know what? I'm not. I'm just talking about what happened. Now, if you want to talk about someone who has made themselves out to be a victim, I would talk about Ben Zion, who's constantly complaining about how he's being sabotaged by techno fascists, because that is true victimhood, thinking that techno fascists are sabotaging his campaign, when meanwhile there are actual victims of stalking that are working their asses off to make things happen for the Transhumanist Party. So, you know, just put things in perspective. Make sure that you don't believe the lies of stalkers that spread misinformation, and make sure that you're protecting yourself online and not believing malicious gossip. Always be real, always cross-check everything, always make sure that you're questioning your sources, and always talk to the person. If you read something about somebody online, always ask the person what the truth is. Always make your own mind up.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for 3 minutes. And now we pose the final prepared question to candidate Ben Zion. Candidate Ben Zion, while you are clearly a left-leaning candidate, what are your major concerns with the Democratic Party and the major ways in which you as a transhumanist candidate would be different from the Democratic candidates?
Yes. Well, in every way, we would be different from the two-party system. And I don't consider this system to be, these two parties to be sufficiently distinct from one another to even be called two parties. They are both corporatist parties, and undermine them in every way. I'd like to take a moment and talk about what Rachel Haywire was saying a moment ago. Rachel Haywire was kicked out of the Foresight Institute, and as she mentioned in this debate, fled to the other side of the country as a result. She has a lot of people in that history who don't want to do business with her anymore. You know, we can name 4 or 5 other organizations, you know, around this kind of conversation. So she can make herself out to be the victim if she wants, just as she's in the same breath as she's attacking the biggest mailing list for people within our worldview.
Funded by a child rapist. Don't forget that part.
Okay. I don't know what that was, but
it was funded by a child rapist.
Candidate Ben Zion is currently speaking. You will have the opportunity for rebuttals later. Candidate Ben Zion, please proceed.
I'll defer the rest of my time to the schizophrenic.
Neurodiversity.
Yeah. It helps if you want to promote some ideas. It helps to be able to string 2 sentences together. You're not going to be able to sit down and do any interviews that way.
I think, given that you've deferred your time, candidate Ben Zion, we will move on to candidate Holtzapfel for his last question. And his last question is this. It appears that achieving the 222 goals is easier in some parts of the United States and in the world than in others. So in your view, what are the main obstacles to attaining those goals in some parts of the world today? Are they primarily technological, cultural, or political, or a combination of the above? And how would you work to remove those obstacles? Candidate Holtzapfel, you have 3 minutes.
Well, yes, I think in order to achieve those goals of food, water, shelter, it is imperative that we actually put a quantity on what we're talking about doing, so that we can factor in the cost and what technologies would be most useful and applicable in that condition. And that could be anywhere from identifying the fact that this population cannot exist in this space. We're going to have to move them to another location, give them a migration opportunity, and also in there that they can comprehend what is required of them in order for them to have 222. And it'll be easy to get the cooperation of those that don't have and never have had clean water or food.
try and get that debate back. That was a riveting debate. Absolutely riveting. I'll give Ben Zion a quick call. We'll see what happened. Absolutely riveting debate. That was a lot of name calling going on there. A lot of name calling. All right, so Ben's not there right now, but when they fix up the stream, we'll go back to that stream. But Holtzapfel was speaking. But what a riveting debate! What an absolutely riveting debate. We've got a lot of name calling. We've got a lot of good questions from Gennady. Fantastic questions from Gennady. So we'll stay in line with that. Absolutely riveting stuff. Completely different candidates. So, as soon as we get this stream back up and running, we'll get you back there for the exclusive stream. In the meantime, enjoy some music while we try and figure out what's going on with the stream.
Gentlemen, my name is Gennady Stoker.
technologies and more redundant systems for supplying our food, water, and shelter when these things do occur. So I'm good. I can't hear you.
Yes, thank you, candidate Holtzapfel. You were right on time for this response. And now we will move on to the next phase of our debate. I apologize for the momentary stream outage. It seems to have been resolved now. And this is just in time for our rebuttals and miscellaneous remarks. Before we go to the viewer questions, we will give each candidate 3 minutes to speak about whatever they want, essentially. So this is your opportunity to address anything thus far in the debate and give your perspective on it. Candidate Haywire, you have 3 minutes.
Great. So a lot of people are saying that I don't have a filter in the comments. And I just want to say that while that isn't true, unfiltered self-expression is very important. If all we have is people that are really restrained, then we might as well just have robots. Now, robots are fantastic, but we need a human spirit to bring us forward into a future of artists. That's what Zoltan Islam is so passionate about when he talks about this artist class that's going to evolve. That's what I talk about in my book, The New Art Right, the artists that are leading us forward into a future. Now, the artists aren't thinking about filters or self-restraint. The artists are thinking about passionate self-expression. And I am connected to an incredible community of artists, musicians, filmmakers, photographers, philosophers, self-expressive people that aren't worried about restraining themselves. What they're concerned about is expressing themselves. They are out of the box. So was Steve Jobs. So was Bill Gates. You know who else wasn't worried about restraint? Elon Musk. When he talked about going to Mars, when he was a teenager, he wasn't thinking about filtering himself. He was thinking about going to Mars. So yes, we need to restrain ourselves a bit, but if we restrain ourselves too much, we're not going to go to Mars. If we restrain ourselves too much, we're not going to transcend the species. We're going to be stuck as humans forever. If we restrain ourselves too much, we're not going to cure aging. And if we restrain ourselves too much, we're not going to be able to fund LSD or MDMA as therapeutic remedies. If we restrain ourselves too much, the Transhumanist Party will never get out of its echo chamber. As Charles was talking about earlier in the debate, and thank you, Charles, for addressing the echo chamber issue. If we restrain ourselves too much and don't give way to transgressive self-expression, we will be stuck as a fringe party with no outreach. Now, yes, I can be a bit much for people, but we are all, as transhumanists, a bit much for the mainstream. And I think it's time to stop restraining ourselves, to expand our outreach, for all of us to unite as one party, one third party, the Transhumanist Party, to go outside of the box like Elon Musk did, like David Bowie did, like the industrial band Front 242 did, to go beyond the center.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for 3 minutes. Now, candidate Ben Zion, you have 3 minutes for rebuttals and miscellaneous remarks.
Yes. Well, I'll say at the risk of, people are saying that I'm responding too much to Haywire, but there's nothing controversial about the Transhumanist Party. There's nothing that's too far outside of the mainstream in the Transhumanist Party. We are at core, like the Humanity Plus organization, like all of these organizations, we are life extensionists. We are techno-optimists. It's nothing scary about that. There's things that we can do to make that scary. I think you're probably doing some of those things, but it's terribly uncontroversial. The de facto life extension extensionist that Mr. Holtzapfel remarked about, I do believe that's 90+% of the population. And we need to be appealing to all of those people. The best way to do that is to say things that make sense. The Futurist New Deal is a platform that makes sense. It's a result of collaborations of serious-minded policy analysts and individuals in the Arizona Transhumanist Party. And we've been working tirelessly, as I said, averaging 20 interviews a week. All of these are thought leaders in technology or political figures, interviewing career politicians. As I mentioned, interviewed a minister, an emissary from the Estonian government, talking about building out this operation, making the Transhumanist Party a mainstream party by advancing these goals that we have in common with this kind of organization, particularly e-governance and I-voting. But there's a ripple effect from those things, embracing advanced technology in the near term. We all know this, and this is what we need to be focusing on. Public health, it's not sexy. It doesn't drive clicks, but there's ways that we're doing it that does. Human development, talking about economics, it's still something that people are enjoying these conversations, and people inside and outside of this organization are doing. You will be rewarded for supporting this organization in whatever way you see fit. I do believe that we're on track with some of these outcomes that we want. Sometimes in these aforementioned chat rooms, I'm hearing people say that they don't care about techno-progressive policy or techno-futurist policy, that we should just put the bar kind of low. We should just have fun thought experiments, right-wing thought experiments, or far futurist thought experiments, like Haywire does. Oh, what if we could bring Hitler back from the dead? What a fun thing! Now, that's not advancing any conversation. That's just more silliness. And so please go the extra mile and support an organization like the Transhumanist Party. Support an organization like the Arizona Transhumanist Party. Take some time. Look at the documents that we've published about the Futurist New Deal. Look at some of these talks that we're doing with important individuals in this community. Don't be attacking one another. Don't be attacking Max Moore. Max Moore was doing this when you were still in diapers. Everybody keep up the pace. You guys are running great campaigns. I am impressed with everything that you're doing. We have these little transactional things, but you guys are doing a good job. Don't take it too hard, Rachel. And everybody have a nice time. Check out the Futurist New Deal, please. It is the way of moving this party into the mainstream.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You spoke for 3 minutes and 50 seconds, so that subtracts 50 seconds from your subsequent time, but you have accumulated a lot of time prior to this. Now, candidate Holtzapfel, you have 3 minutes for rebuttals and miscellaneous remarks.
One that sticks to my mind is Rachel, I love your enthusiasm, but I have no idea what you're talking about arriving on a rocket ship. But we do have,
the mothership, I think.
Well, we do have a rocket scientist in the Transhumanist Party. I think we have many. And so that space exploration, the aspiration of humankind to reach beyond, is something that the Transhumanist Party has to embrace. And I too am an artist rather than a scientist, and I take a different approach, and I think that's what's required to reach the mainstream is a more thought out. I'm not saying that we can't be controversial, but we have to be understandable, and that's what I will try to do. Not throwing stones at anyone else, but I'm not going to pick on anybody. I do want the conversation to advance. I think that once we actually have a nominee, if the nominee will work with the the Transhumanist Party, in good communication, we can clarify this message and we can bring all of the core values into a more understandable, a more attractively presented format that we can make a difference. And as I say, we can set up possibly that for down ballots and for future presidential runs to where we can actually break into that two-party system. I think over the next coming years, there's going to be less and less confidence in that as the independent party has grown to be the largest party. That shows that there is room. People are looking, people are dissatisfied with those existing parties. And I would do what I can to in an understandable way to present those basic platforms that the Transhumanist Party would support and incorporate the ideas for at least presentation that Ben has and that Rachel have. If it was something that I saw was congruent with my platform, I would try to incorporate that in, or at least allow room for that to be developed by that candidate in something of a shadow government of sorts. So yeah, that's I look forward to moving forward. And I don't, as I say, my phone's plugged in and it keeps draining. I'll reserve hopefully time for questions if we can get to the audience questions. I'm very anxious to do that.
Yes, thank you, candidate Holtzapfel, and we will now get to the audience questions. The first audience question is one for every candidate because I think it's an important question to discuss essentially what the Transhumanist Party ought to focus on. So David Shoemaker asked essentially, what is the single most important issue or the single most important concern that you believe the Transhumanist Party should address? Candidate Haywire, I will give you 3 minutes for this question.
Making cryonics affordable to everybody, making transhumanism for everyone. There are too many gatekeepers right now, some who are being funded by very, very questionable sources that have been in the news recently. It is so important for each and every human being, whether they are rational, neurodiverse, schizophrenic, or anywhere in between, to have access to life extension technology. We need to be subsidizing cryonics so life extension is affordable. Nobody should have to go through death. We need to begin curing aging and making life extension affordable. Transhumanism is for everyone. I like how Charles was talking about doing outreach to homeless people. I have been homeless before and I talk to people on the streets. And I would love to see those people. They had boom boxes, they were rapping. Some of them, they were philosophizing, they were schizophrenic. And they were talking about how the government was controlling their thoughts. Maybe some of them were full of it. Most of them are full of it, but some of them, they had little nuggets of truth. And you know what? Those people, they deserved to have access to life extension, just like every upper middle class citizen, just like every wealthy billionaire. Those people deserved to have life extension too. Cryonics is for everyone. Life extension is for everyone. Transhumanism is for everyone. And public education on transhumanism is for everybody. Universal basic income, which Andrew Yang began to lead the charge on, is so important. With all of these displaced workers, we need to begin sharing wealth with people in our nation through taking the money that's going to war, surveillance, keeping nonviolent drug offenders and sex workers in prison, whether they have jobs as dominatrixes, whether they're prostitutes or they're simply wearing bikini photos for
fetish sites, one pieces, whatever they're doing, whether they're in prison, whether they're selling drugs on street corners and crying about how the government is putting chips in their brains. They need life extension and transhumanism for all.
Hey, are we still live here?
Yes, candidate Ben Zion, can you hear me?
I can, sir.
Yes. So you have 3 minutes to address the question of what is the main issue that the Transhumanist Party should focus on.
Yeah. Well, that was a moving speech, and I think there were some little nuggets of truth in there. Maybe there's some little nuggets of truth coming from the Haywire campaign to some degree. But we need to maybe aim the bar a little higher than that. I'll say of this discussion, I do not think that, I think that cryonics is pretty well subsidized in the sense that it is available in the marketplace. And I think that we have so many interventions coming down the pipeline for life extension that subsidizing that in the way that was described there seems it's an idea for someone who hasn't really seriously considered these perhaps. But I've heard plenty of people say this. It came up in my discussion with Florian Marcus. It came up with my discussion in a pre-interview today. There are awful lot of ways that we can be using big data in emerging biomedicine. We can be using automation and advanced algorithms in emerging biomedicine. And all the various actual medical breakthroughs coming down the pipeline towards ending cell death. Those are the things that we need to focus on. I don't have a cryonics plan because I believe that life extension will be achieved through these other means. And so I would not support that. But I do agree with candidate Haywire that radical life extension is our organizing principle in this community. And thank you for being willing to stand up for that. How much time do I have left?
You have 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Okay. I want to address something that came up before about trade protectionism in general. This is not a laughing matter. And you can dismiss a whole multitude of sins by saying that we're not a mainstream party, so we don't have to talk seriously about these things. But millions of U.S. jobs, people who were earning a living before this trade war broke out, have been lost in the course of this trade war. The kind of positions that Ms. Haywire are taking on this subject would grow that trade war exponentially. That would possibly lead to a society that cannot support an affluent society. That's not the way that anybody is seriously going to approach this. So we have to be a little careful with that rhetoric. Maybe there is a place for some kind of economic isolationism. We are on the same page as to other forms of isolationism, but we have to try to present a serious face of this organization and give serious consideration to these heady issues as we're talking. And the Futures New Deal does do that. I'm not convinced that these other campaigns do.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. Now we move to candidate Holtzapfel. What is the single most important issue that the Transhumanist Party should be addressing?
Well, I think the single most important issue that humanity should be addressing is the mass migration of people due to climate change and other factors. Now, if I think it was Bertrand Russell that said, in order to have a peaceful, prosperous society, we must have a stationary society. And with climate change, we're going to have more and more mass dislocation of populations. And we need to come up with, as I say, methodologies and education of those populations on dealing with a new reality over this coming years and decades and hopefully centuries that we're going to populate this planet. So we need to reach people at an emotional level and an intellectual level. an appeal to what most people have been programmed to respond to fear. I think a good dose of fear that brings people to a common realization of what's important and what's necessary that we do is a good thing. And it's becoming more and more a topic within the government and within industry that is reinvesting in ways that are more sustainable. So climate change is my number one reasoning for doing most of the advocacy that I do, because the problems are going to get worse, not better. And the current economic structure is not currently going to reward that, but it's becoming more and more vogue, more popular to do things for each other and for the environment. And a lot of it is just talk and advertising and possibly deceptive in order just to sell product. But I think if we have a common product, we can see a vision, we can depict what problems are going to happen, we can foresee the things that are happening. As time goes by, we'll have a history of those accurate predictions. And if we can create a mechanism for dealing with those displaced populations, we can possibly negate more, and we can deal with those that are displaced more efficiently and get them back up to where they can contribute back to the common good. Everybody plant a tree,
Thank you, candidate Holtzapfel, and we will add 10 seconds to your time. Now, the next question that I would like to ask is from Starseeder, one of our commentators, who is interested in vertical garden towers in cities across the United States. He's referring to vertical farming, which is one emerging technology that the Transhumanist Party supports. What would be your policy positions toward vertical garden towers and vertical farming? I will allocate 2 minutes to this question for each candidate. Candidate Haywire, you may begin.
Well, I think the first step to this would be to create a video game for vertical farming. I remember growing up and playing a game called The Sims, where you could create these miniature kind of housing kind of projects where you could create these characters and you could build walls and you could build doors, you could even build pools and you could swim on them. So I would start by creating these prototypes of farms in which you could use these simulations to create farms through these video games. And then I would take that to build a wider model in which we could create these actual farms and we could test them that way. And then I would begin building the farms, subsidizing them, and using them kind of like as experimental test playgrounds once we began building them through an actual model. And maybe we could have a few trial kind of people to test them out and just kind of see how that goes. I mean, we have a big green revolution that is taking place right now. I think that that's really exciting. I have a friend, his name is Jonathan. He is a nuclear engineer right now, but he's also very focused on green technology. And I think that this kind of green kind of tech revolution is very exciting right now, and I'd love to see more of that happening. So I think definitely like breeding entertainment and green technology is a great way to get the awareness out about these technologies, and I want to see more of that. A lot of people, they will scoff at the entertainment and the culture aspect. They take it lightly because we only care about policy. But the people that only care about policy, what they don't have? Outreach. And you know what the people who care about entertainment and culture have? Outreach. You know what we have? Popularity. You know what we have? The ability to reach the minds of the masses and to grow the Transhumanist Party and to make sustainable farming popular so we can make this happen. Let's start with video games. Let's start building these prototypes through video games, and then let's make them an actual reality for sustainable farming,
Let's begin building these green technologies so we can upgrade farming to a higher level and bring forth this green revolution that we've been working on for so long. I'd love to see this develop. I think there is such a great potential in what is occurring right now. And I just really look forward to seeing what's going to happen and these next few years, especially with all of this talk about global climate catastrophe. I'm really just looking forward to seeing how culture and technology and the green revolution intersect. And whatever your view is on climate change, we can't deny that we're at a very exciting point in time of transition right now. I know an economic philosopher named Robin Hanson who talks about farmers and foraging. I think he'd be a good person to talk to about this. He's also a cryonicist. So I think that there are a lot of interdisciplinary fields that could be intersected when we're dealing with this kind of issue. And I find the whole thing really interesting. And it's also a good way to bring environmentalists into the transhumanist movement. We could talk to people that are in the Green Party and kind of recruit them into the Transhumanist Party through talking about this kind of farming. And, you know, a lot of people that voted for Jill Stein, they're kind of jaded with the current Democratic Party. We could bring them on over to transhumanism. So there's a lot of opportunity there too. So entertainment, recruitment, and upgrading what we currently have as a model.
Yes, thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for 4 minutes on that question, so that subtracts 2 minutes from your subsequent time. Now we go to candidate Ben Zion. You have 2 minutes to address the question of vertical farming, vertical towers in cities. What is your policy approach toward those technologies?
Yes. Well, I mean, the story of modernity and very much the trajectory of the 20th century, it does revolve around being able to support and feed 7 billion plus people in this world. And we are going to have to face continuing concerns with this. At the same time, I don't think we're the population is growing as large as quickly as some people suppose. In the it's common trope in the popular imagination, the Malthusian dilemma. But I don't think we're actually facing that. I think the dilemma that we are facing is one where we have to provide sustenance and not be engaging in imperialist shenanigans that undermine smaller states or less developed states, as is very much been the case for 150 years in the United States, and particularly since about 1950. The farming issue is a serious one, and it's one that is being addressed by the private sector. I would place it somewhere on a ranking of important issues for techno-optimists. You know, maybe in the top 100 in terms of securing public funds to that end. But I would not say that it is the first thing that I would turn to. There are an awful lot of other ways to be providing more sustainable food sources. Certainly one of those would be vat-grown meats and meat substitutes. This is the number 2 existential risk in the climate crisis constellation of concerns is these concerns from factory farming. So that's something we have to address. And there's a lot of ways to do that besides this very innovative and interesting type of farming.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You spoke for 2 minutes, and now we move on to candidate Holtzapfel. What are your thoughts about the desirable policy toward vertical farming and vertical towers in cities?
Yeah, well, the urbanization and the density of our cities is growing, and that's if we're going to have, unless we're going to have food deserts where millions of people don't have access to those basic requirements, we're going to have to grow it locally as much as possible, even within those areas that vertical farming is the only answer. And vertical farming is also much better. It's better with water, uses less water. So I'm all about those going up as opposed to out, leaving as much of our natural environment as possible. Takes me just a moment about Ben Zion's idea of using public lands, and I think there's a lot of benefit to that. I don't necessarily agree with the numbers of what money would generate, because I'm not sure who has that money now and who would abandon what they currently have. But I think it's a great idea to use and build our new cities where we can incorporate vertical farming and the innovation of new constructions and materials.
I have a little
Thank
additional
you,
time.
candidate
Can I address that?
Holtzapfel, and you have added 40 seconds. Yes, you may. You may, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so a few people have commented on this at 170. Please.
Yes, sorry, there was a bit of lag, but please proceed.
A few people have commented on this, that $173 trillion is a large number. But these lands, this is 85% of these national lands. Just think of those 15% that are national parks. Those other 85% of lands, those are valued at over $200 trillion. Leasing them out in a very structured way that I have described at great length would provide well in excess of the amount that we would be required to provide this basic income to every adult in this country. And it's not just an academic exercise. You mentioned, Mr. Holsopple, before that these ripple effects in the negative that we have from people living so close to the poverty line. For people, it's 1.5 million people just living on the street in this country that's come up in this debate. This is not something that anyone should be subjected to. And the basic income of a more robust kind that is funded in a responsible way will do that for us. And I would say also basic income, this is not an idea that Andrew Yang came up with. I know there's some Yang Gang guys watching this, but this goes back to the birth of this country with Thomas Paine and 2 or 3 schemes, including one in 1969 about the size of Andrew Yang's. So he has done something to promote the visibility of this, but he is not in fact the author of this movement.
All right, thank you, candidate Ben Zion, and you spent 1 minute and 40 seconds of your time, but you still have time remaining for some questions. Now, next, because you did broach the subject of universal basic income, we're going to focus on some candidate-specific questions on UBI. The first question goes to candidate Haywire from Graydon L., who asks, how do you plan to fund a UBI practically? He notes the U.S. has a massive debt problem already, and won't that exacerbate the problem? Candidate Haywire, you have 2 minutes.
That's a great question. The U.S. does have a massive debt problem, and we definitely need to be focusing on that. That's why we need to have a major cost of the military budget. Now, right now, we're spending $650 billion on overseas wars. To me, that's absolutely absurd. Now, I think that we can gut those by at least 60%. There's no reason for us to have troops in Afghanistan, Iraq, Venezuela. Let's get them out of there. We're exporting and importing into these banks. That's $55 billion. The Department of Education, now, while there are some good things going on, there are also some senseless classes going on that are brainwashing people. That's a budget of $100 billion. If we maybe cut that by 30% and maybe focus on a more independent private education alternative, we can use a lot of that money for UBI. And then, of course, my platform is focused on getting nonviolent drug offenders and sex workers out of prison, which is a major issue for me. That is $3 billion right there. Now, the DEA
we are spending $2 billion. The NSA, horrible people, they are spying on us right now. In fact, they are watching you right now. The NSA is watching you. They are watching me. They are watching all of us. I don't know if that makes sense to people who might be accusing me of this schizophrenia or something, but they're watching us, the CIA, not schizophrenia, real entity. $27 billion. They're watching us. So let's cut that spending and fund universal basic income. Now, if we cut all of that spending and we use that money to give all of our citizens $2,000 a month, there is no reason that needs to create debt for anybody. What we're doing is taking money that is going to war and locking up non-violent people and being spent to spy on us, to help grow a thriving artistic nation in which people can express themselves. We can do that without creating national debt. I mean, my UBI proposal is for the people. It's not something that is just based on regurgitating somebody else's work. Not that I don't respect Zoltan's UBI proposal. I think it's fantastic, but my UBI proposal is original. It's authentic. It's based on things that I have come up with, based on things that I believe in. And I am sick of seeing these overseas wars. I am sick of seeing people that have done nothing non-consensual or harmful being locked up. And I am sick of our citizens being spied on. I've had enough of it. I've had enough of watching my friends in poverty. I've had enough of homelessness, just like Charles has. And I've had enough of watching people suffer. Transhumanism is about ending suffering. With my UBI proposal, we can have $2,000 a month going to every American citizen without creating national debt. I think I might have a little more time. Does anybody have any more questions? Or
Candidate Haywire, you answered that question in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So I am going to subtract 1 minute and 40 seconds from your subsequent time, but we'll move on to Candidate Ben Zion. Candidate Ben Zion, this question is for you because your UBI proposal relies on the federal land dividend to fund it. And I think some of the commentators in the thread have mistaken that for a land tax. And I recall there was a comment that essentially with vertical farmings and the cities becoming more vertical, there would be less space on which this agricultural development would occur, so less land to tax. But can you explain the differences between the federal land dividend as you envision it and a Georgist land tax, which is what I think those commentators were referring to? And you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I'd like to say that candidate Haywire has given an awful lot of thought to this, but I haven't heard a lot of numbers besides estimates in the negative as to how much her plan would cost. We have some pretty clear ideas about how much our plan would cost. In fact, that $173 trillion, even if it's a little bit off the mark, there would still be additional monies to fund other kinds of programs that would be restorative to the middle class in this country. So it is and this program is sufficiently distinct from that of Zoltanistan. But that being said, you can simply do a search and find out that this program, if you search Zoltanistan federal land dividend, you'll see a clear description of how this is funded and how it works. You can also go to our ebook that I mentioned on the Futurist New Deal and see some of these materials, the last chapter of that. There's awful lot of information out there, so we don't have to worry too much about this program being an added tax burden to people in this country. We do have to think seriously about any tax code undertaking. Rewriting the tax code is something that it can be something that can undermine all manner of industries and techno progress outcomes. But that's why I've opted to do this in a serious way that doesn't contribute to hyperinflation. And most importantly, it actually would fund this program sufficiently, which this other one would not.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You answered that question in 1 minute and 45 seconds. So you've added 15 seconds to your time. And
what's my total extra time?
So let me calculate your total extra time in just 1 moment. So now you have 1 minute and 55 seconds of extra time accumulated throughout this set of exchanges. And the next UBI question, though, will go to candidate Holtzapfel. And this was an observation by one of our earlier commentators. Essentially, candidate Holtzapfel, both candidates Haywire and Ben Zion have a detailed set of proposals to fund a universal basic income. Do you have a specific approach toward a universal basic income within your platform beyond just the 222 goals? And if so, could you please describe it in 2 minutes?
You know, I think a basic income for those that are most in need is a good idea. To give it to everyone, I don't think is necessary, and we'll have to explain to people why some people get it and some people don't. Then we'll have to educate people that when they get it doesn't mean that they stop working, that there is a path to a more robust involvement in society, and we have to present a path that they can take to enjoy the camaraderie and the growth of the economy based on their contribution to it. I don't have a universal basic income per se in my plan now. I think in talking to people that are better economists than I am, I would be open to such a thing, but I'm not the expert to present that. Other than I think Ben's idea is great of using those public lands and tying that into the vertical farming. When we go in, we don't just use vertical farming. We use all available technologies in rebuilding these cities, and we encourage and reward those corporations that are part of it, and those people that come up with those technologies. But yeah, no specific universal basic income, but along that line, I think that we should have within our cities places that hungry people can go and get fed, where they can bathe and change clothes, and minimum places that people can sleep. And that is my form of a universal basic income, is providing that basic minimum to people. And we're already spending tens of billions of dollars on that. So I don't think that's going to be a problem transferring some of those funds to things that are making sense to experts.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that for a moment, Gennady?
Yes, you still have some additional time. Candidate Holtzapfel, you were right on time in your response.
Yes. So I think reasonable people can disagree on different approaches to this. Negative income tax, a federal job guarantee, or alternatives that are often floated. These are things that volumes have been written on. The United States has some features of a negative income tax. Not least of those is the earned income tax credit. But the difference here is that means testing, aside from the idea that it's unfair, I don't think it's unfair to withhold this from the super wealthy. But at the same time, the very means testing creates a greater expense than it would be to be paying that income to those people. So this is an administrative concern, why we would want to have a basic income rather than other approaches. And there have also been volumes written about that, so I won't get long-winded on it. Thank you for allowing me to address that.
Yes. Thank you, candidate Ben Zion, and you spoke for 40 seconds on that, so you have 1 minute and 15 seconds of accumulated time for subsequent questions and statements. Now, we have delved into the subject of UBI in a fairly thorough fashion. The next set of questions is going to be candidate specific from the audience, and I endeavored to pick some challenging questions for each candidate once again. So candidate Haywire, one of our viewers stated that if you were to encounter Donald Trump and Donald Trump tries to write you off, and these are the commentator's words and not mine, as a quote, crazy little girl with loony ideas and weird friends, this commentator says that Donald Trump will attack you like this. So if he does attack you like this, how will you respond? And you have 2 minutes.
I would laugh hysterically because the entire nation has accused him of having every mental illness in the book. I mean, people have been talking about how Trump is a narcissist, a sociopath. I mean, what mental disorder have people not accused Trump of having? They've accused him of being a schizophrenic. I mean, people have been talking about Trump's bad mental health for a while. So I would say pot and kettle black. No, I would say pot and kettle white, and then I would flash him the okay symbol. And then maybe I'd ask him if he wanted to have a beer, and we could talk about the working class. I'd say, you'll take the working class of the blue collar. I'll take the working class of the tech collar. We'll divvy them up. You'll represent those guys. I'll represent these guys. And then maybe after I beat you with my pirate spaceship, then you can tell me who's crazy. To the commenter, yes, my friends are weird, but you know what my friends also are? Visionary. You know who else was a visionary? Elon Musk. You know who else was weird? David Bowie. You know what else David Bowie did? He wrote songs about going to outer space. You know what else David Bowie did? He wrote songs about going to outer space that were extremely popular. These were best-selling songs. Now, David Bowie grew to be one of the most popular musicians of our time. Now, guess who was a fan of David Bowie? Elon Musk. So I would say, Mr. Trump, have you ever listened to David Bowie? Do you think that he was one of us? And I would say to Mr. Trump, do you think Steve Bannon is a Bowie fan? I would ask him. I mean, I heard that Steve Bannon was a fan of Alexander Dugin, that he read some Rene Guénon, and he was interested in the fourth turning. So maybe if Trump wasn't a fan, maybe Bannon would have been a fan of Bowie. And then I would say to Trump, maybe we're both crazy. Maybe we live in a society of lunatics, and maybe your friends should meet my friends, and maybe your working class voters and my working class voters can get together and overthrow this corrupt globalist regime with my pirate spaceship. And then I would say, Mr. Trump, I've got something to tell you. My populists are more transgressive than yours. Big man.
All right, Haywire, you spoke for 2 minutes and 20 seconds on this question. So that subtracts 20 seconds from your time. Now, candidate Ben Zion, the next question goes to you. And one of our commentators accused you of admiring Chinese authoritarianism. And this was an opportunity for you to discuss your views on China and trade with China, as well as China's alleged authoritarian regime. You have 2 minutes.
Well, I mean, the worldview of the China hawk, this is largely a rhetorical position, right? There's there's not going to be a war with China. There should not be even this trade war that we have with China now. This is not a winning proposal. To say such a thing is not to say that a Chinese social credit score or a Chinese human rights abuses or a limited number of other concerns. I mean, some of these things are just a silly kind of tropes on the part of these far right individuals who want to have something to talk about so that they can. Okay, candidate Haywire is having a hard time right now. But there's no realistic sense in which this is a pro-China platform, and this is just kind of more fake news, made up stuff, just like what's going on right now with candidate Haywire. I'll defer the rest of my time to candidate Haywire.
Okay, so I just want to say I'm not far right, I'm far riot, because we need to have a
Well, I was not referring to you in that statement. I was referring, in fact, to China hawks in government. But you made it about yourself, as you tend to do.
Huh? You said you were referring your time to me. Now you're saying you're not referring your time to me. Are you going to make up your mind, or are you going to make up your ass?
Yeah, okay. I'll make up my ass. That's good.
Well, at least I'm wearing makeup. Maybe you put your makeup on your butthole, then you look a little better.
Okay, I'll take that into consideration. It's good campaign advice.
All right.
I'm sorry. I can't take you seriously. I'm trying, but it's just not happening.
And now you're not taking any of this seriously. That's the problem. That's why you're going to lose.
That's why you're losing.
Well, candidates, I think it is time for us to move on to the next question. And the next question is candidate Holtzapfel. I think this is just about the single most negative allegation that anyone in the comment thread has made about your campaign, and that is it has been accused of being globalist. Now, how would you respond to that? What is your view of globalism? Do you have any particular understanding of that term? Is it good or is it bad? And either way, how does it relate to your campaign and Project 222?
Well, we are one of many nations, and my allegiance is to this country, but I think we need to be leaders among all nations. So if globalism means that we become homogenous with those other nations, and we don't favor our own borders, we don't make America first. If that's the antithesis of globalism, of making American first, and Rachel was saying of trade more within the U.S., we don't have those options. We breathe the same air, we drink the same water, we rely on the same technologies to produce our shelter and our food. There's less and less boundaries, and that's the reason we're going vertical. I think we need to take in the strengths of people, not nations, not parties. I want to reach out to everyone, yes, because we all share that same common denominator. And therefore, we can reach the intelligence of the individual, take somebody's food, water, and shelter away for a couple of days, and they're going to listen very well if you offer it back to them. So those nations as a whole, they need to learn to manage their own economies. We're not going in and rescuing the economy of each country, but we do want to advocate and offer ways that those economies can grow so that we can trade with the population that is within those countries. So I don't see a disconnect. I think that we all are in the world together, and we need to respond in such a way.
Yes. Thank you.
Can I take a moment to talk about globalism with my remaining time?
Yes, candidate Holtzapfel, you were right on time. Thank you for your response. Candidate Ben Zion, you have 2 minutes and 5 seconds of accumulated time. Feel free to use any of that to discuss globalism.
Yes, thank you, sir. So this word is often used by people who I would regard as low information consumers of media, and it's used by people on the rightward spectrum, but not exclusively. And there's a lot to unpack there. For one thing, it's often used in the concept of discussing some post-nationalist ideas, which everyone in this panel has spoken in support of in a variety of ways. It's also, but at the same time, it's also used to talk about kleptocratic practices or generally very staunchly pro-business practices. Post-nationalism and an overly pro-business set of regulations, those things are not closely related. So what people are doing when they're using this term globalism is just throwing out something, a buzzword that sounds cool and makes them sound really informed. And adds nothing to a conversation. That people who have a Luciferian view of life extension and transhumanists will just throw out a lot of emotional noise on that score. Metaphysical concepts and superstitious concepts have nothing to do with what anyone's doing in this organization. So please don't use this word globalism, for God's sake.
All right. Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. And you spoke on that question for 1 minute and 20 seconds. You still have 45 seconds of accumulated time for subsequent remarks. Now, candidate Holtzapfel, you've already addressed that question. So now we can move on to what I think will be our final question from the audience before we get to concluding statements. And that question is from Taylor B., who asks, how will you endeavor to make transhumanism and the Transhumanist Party more popular with the youth? Candidate Haywire, you have 2 minutes.
That's a great question. As you guys know, that is one of my main focuses, culture. Transhumanism is all about culture. With the Telegraph, when I did the interview about the corruption going on at humanities with the child rapist, I'd rather not keep referring to him, but it was a big issue recently. I had heard the term transhumanist in the article, and I thought that was a great term. And cultural transhumanism is all about reaching out to the youth. The youth need culture. They need public education on transhumanism. And we need to be going into the classrooms and showing them what transhumanism is about. They need to be playing video games. Now, whether it's video games about vertical farming, whether these are video games about artificial intelligence, video games about mind uploading, video games about biomechanics, or simply virtual reality games in which they're interacting with simulations, in which they're creating art with augmented reality, in which they're learning how to enhance their bodies through these virtual simulations. We need public education on transhumanism. Even if we're just going to preschools and we're having people teach kids how to paint an augmented reality, we're teaching kids how to paint in the sky. That's what we need to be doing to reach the youth and educate them about transhumanism. Now, you think about a sandbox and you think about a playground and you think about some kids playing in a sandbox on a playground when they're 4 years old. Now, imagine if that sandbox and that playground has augmented reality. Now you've got the kids in the sandbox and they're playing in augmented reality and they're painting in the sandbox and they're sharing their visions with each other in that sandbox through AR. Imagine the possibilities of public education on transhumanism.
Yes, thank you, candidate Haywire. And now we will proceed to candidate Ben Zion. Candidate Ben Zion, you have 2 minutes to address the question of how transhumanism can become more influential with the youth.
Okay, sorry, I was hearing the Sesame Street song in my head after this this playground discussion. Yeah, so I mean, we can do a lot of things to do that, and we are doing a lot of things to do that. You know, hollowing out as your key demo incels and people under 30 who are interested in words like alt-right and art-right. That's not who this party is, and so we can be doing better than that. And that's done through all manner of outreach, but it's not done through attacking the Humanity Plus organization. Whatever mistakes they may have made, that's all of our viewers. That's all of our voters right there. So, I mean, are you going to go out and get 1,000 more of your incels to get signed up in the next few days? I really doubt it. We have to take a serious-minded approach to this, but also keep it fun and interesting. And it has been fun and interesting, and we can be doing an awful lot more. As I said, this organization, the Arizona Transhumanist Party, is reaching out to people across the spectrum. The Transhumanist Party is reaching out to people across the spectrum. I've been doing an awful lot of interviews and press with people from all walks of life to try and enliven and broaden this landscape. And I am pleased with the progress that we are making in reaching young people. You know, an awful lot of people in my network are millennials. They're Greens, Independents, Justice Democrats, and people of various walks of life. Those people, this country is skewing further and further left. So we have to kind of maybe not take a strategy where we actually have 20 people that we're reaching out to. I'm finished.
Yes, thank you, candidate Ben Zion. And you have added 10 seconds to your time. And now, candidate Holtzapfel, for your 2 minutes, could you please address what you would like to have done to make transhumanism more popular with the youth and to increase the youth reach of the Transhumanist Party?
Yes, I think the youth are the most ripe for transhumanism. They're not vested in a economy. They're not vested in the use of our resources in a particular way. And they are the most aware of the impacts of a failed economy, a failed environment, the refugee situation. They've got the longest to live. So I think they're the easiest ones to reach if we put together. I love Rachel's idea and of the video games and virtual reality, you know, and I think if they're crafted to introduce technologies like vertical farming and urban density and what it takes to get along socially, and what it, besides learning a vocation or some education that allows you to enter into the present economy, how to transform the present economy to one that has longevity, that is able to adapt to those challenges and the changes of our economic system and our infrastructure, and education is the center of that. And we need to get away from the bricks and mortar of traditional education and bring out the most creative in creative ways that children will listen to, and they can become members of the Transhumanist Party. If I'm not mistaken, there is no age limit in people voting in the Transhumanist Party. And that's something that in 2024, maybe we'll have a electrified base within the 14-year-olds, within the 8th graders. And just quickly, one way that I found a great way to communicate with people is in front of the White House or walking around the mall. And I've made some videos of that you can see on the YouTube channel through the website. And it's really, and I concentrated on the young, not the very young, but the 18 to 25-year-old. And they get it. They see that there's a need for things. And I wasn't a transhumanist the last time I was there. But you can bet that the next time I am in DC or San Francisco or any of the places that I travel, that transhumanism will be introduced, particularly as an educator that I'm speaking to, and because they get it, they want their kids to have the best. That's why they're in education. So I think if we work through the school system and we put it out there, that it either makes sense or it doesn't. And I think that the youth have the most to lose, so they're going to take the flag.
All right.
Gennady, if I could have 30 seconds of my additional time, please.
Yeah, that is fine. I just wanted to mention candidate Holtzapfel spoke for 3 minutes in response to this question, so that takes a minute off his time. He is going to have 20 seconds for final remarks. Candidate Ben Zion, you have 55 seconds of accumulated time, so please proceed.
Yes. Well, unlike Mr. Holsopple, I have been a life extensionist and techno-optimist for about as long as I can remember. If you're interested in these ideas that have been brought up in these previous two comments, I would suggest that you check out an interview that I did with my hero, Isaac Arthur, a great technology, science and futurism blogger from the very same podcast. And we talked about various metaverse concepts. And there's an awful lot of policy implementations in the near future that could be derived from those that we're not capitalizing upon. So I would applaud both of you for bringing that up. And thank you. And that concludes my time.
All right. Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You spoke for 40 seconds. So you have 15 seconds left over added to the 2 minutes of standard allotment for the closing remarks. The reason why I say that is because candidate Haywire right now has a deficit of 4 minutes, which means, unfortunately, she has consumed the entirety of her closing remarks already. All right. Candidate Ben Zion, that means that your closing remarks are going to be up next. You have 2 minutes and 15 seconds, followed by 20 seconds of candidate Holtzappel's remarks, but candidate Ben Zion, the floor is yours.
Yes. From time immemorial, people have spoken of some life extension concepts or other. And even those of us who've taken an interest in extropianism from the beginning and who have been involved in this remain skeptical on some of these things, and probably will remain skeptical on some of these things. But the simple fact is, last week, George Church, arguably the most accomplished geneticist alive, released a set of articles talking about specific genetic interventions for life extension and also human improvement, upgrading. And this is a fascinating article. It's a wonderful time to be alive, but it is not a foregone conclusion that any of us will benefit from these things to the extent that we want, which is why, as was mentioned just moments ago, outreach is key. And positioning this organization in a responsible way and in a publicity-minded way is the best thing that we can be doing. The Futurist New Deal is the best choice in that regard. We have a platform that has been conceived from the beginning for solving these great human problems. A UBI and e-governance in the broadest sense. These are not just things that we made up. These are things that are meant to get you to a life extension civil society that is sustainable and hopefully avoid the kinds of things where we need to all get on the mothership. That's hopefully avoid the kinds of things where we need to be suing people about having cryonics. These things are a measure of last resort. And so we have to do everything that we can to improve our society from a techno-optimist point of view. And this party is head and shoulders above other parties in describing these new ideas. And so you guys are key. The Futurist New Deal is the choice for you. I hope that you will read our literature and look at what we're doing and continue to be watching all of these interviews and doing real press. Not making jokes, doing real press, not swearing and crying and freaking out, doing real interviews with thought leaders, and doing the best that we can to keep this a serious-minded operation. This is a policy club. It's not a place for people to just be getting their jollies. It is a policy club, and that's what we're trying to do here. And Gennady, you're an excellent leader in that regard. I thank you again, sir, for all that you've done in keeping this organization on track.
Yes, thank you, candidate Ben Zion. I appreciate your good words. And you did speak 30 minutes over your allotted time for your closing remarks. Now, with candidate Haywire, her deficit was sufficiently significant that 30 seconds would not restore her time, but I will add 30 seconds to candidate Holtzapfel. So now, candidate Holtzapfel, you have 50 seconds to provide your closing remarks. Please proceed.
Well, as I started, we have the opportunity to present a big idea. We're a new party, and the majority of people have never heard of us, much less contemplated joining our party. And the transhumanist message to me was fascinating. I related to it. I'd never heard of it before, and I think that there are millions of people out there that can do the same thing. And I believe the big idea of 222 is the tool that we need to get the message out for transhumanism. And I appreciate everyone's time. It's been 3 hours, and thank you very much, Gennady.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. You're brilliant.
Yes, thank you, candidate Holtzapfel. Thank you also to candidate Ben Zion and candidate Haywire for your remarks today. I will make some administrative closing statements in that everyone watching this debate, please make sure that you are registered as members of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Please go to transhumanist-party.org and register by August 10th, 2019, if you have not done so already, because that is what will render you eligible to vote in the electronic primary between August 11th and August 17th. We definitely encourage more people to sign up for membership prior to the expiration of the registration period. So if you are intrigued by any of the candidates and any of their ideas, no matter whom you support, no matter whom you would like to see win, this is your opportunity to have a voice. This is your opportunity to have an impact. And that is what we want to achieve: maximum participation in our electronic primary. Now, you have heard a lot of comments from the candidates, both on policy and on some controversial matters that have been raised. And I don't think there's any way to diminish or de-emphasize the fact that this has been a controversial debate and this is a controversial primary election. I hope that what this venue has provided for everyone is some transparency about where the candidates stand, what their views are, what some of their histories are, and all of this is information that you need to take into consideration when making your decision. I'm not going to be making that decision for you. Every member of the Transhumanist Party is going to have one vote. And as one final remark regarding how the vote will be structured, it will be an electronic vote during a 7-day period. So at any time during that period, you would be able to vote. It would be a ranked preference vote, which means you don't just get to vote for one option. You can rank order all of the options, including a none of the above option, which is standard on all of our ballots. So please display your entire preference set among these candidates. There's no incentive for strategic voting. There's no incentive for you to vote for a so-called lesser evil. Just vote according to your genuine preferences of which candidate you would like to see win the Transhumanist Party nomination. And with that, once again, I would like to thank all of the candidates for participating. I would like to thank all of the audience members for your questions and your involvement in the chat. I would like to thank Pavel Ilin, the secretary of the U.S. Transhumanist Party, for his diligent technical work behind the scenes to make sure that this debate is a success, despite the fact that we lost the ability to use Google Hangouts on air just on August 1st. Nonetheless, this live stream was able to come to fruition. And finally, I would like to thank Steel Archer from Det Nation, because Steel Archer has been also broadcasting a live stream of this debate. And if you go on to his channel, Det Nation, he is going to have some post-debate analysis, which will be quite interesting to watch. So thank you very much, everyone, for your
And I'll be
participation.
going to the Unshackled postmortem of this debate right now. I imagine other people might be able to call in, but so do check that out. The Unshackled, largest alternative media network in Australia, doing great work on detonation, and you can continue this conversation with me and Steel Archer in just moments.
All right, thank you very much. And that concludes our second and final official virtual debate of the U.S. Transhumanist Party 2019.
Right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Remember
you,
to
guys.
go beyond the center with me.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the party is my slogan. Okay.
Here he is. 1 second.
I'm here, yes.
Just give me 1 second.
Let me know when we're live.
We are live. We're still streaming.
Oh.
Just
Hello,
just give me 1 second. Yeah. Just enjoy the music. Alright everybody, hey, welcome back to Detonation. Look, this is a continuous stream, so we've just come off, fresh off the tails of the debate. Wow, what a debate! That was nuts!
Yeah, a little, but still some good discussion was had. I think that overall we're elevating this conversation. So I was pleased with that outcome. People are discussing these issues that have been at my core values for a very, very long time, and particularly life extension. And so I'm pleased that we are able to do as much as we're doing. And you know, nobody has a crystal ball. The press strategies of my opponents, even the more eccentric ones, they do add something. They do add value to the conversation as well.
Absolutely, and the different candidates, different strategies have come out there. I mean, obviously, we have to talk about you and Rachel having a go at each other. There's name calling, there's low blow stuff going on there. But Holtzapfel, he seems to be just staying out of it. He just seems to be staying on message. You know, 222. You know, so a lot going on with Holtzapfel. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. What's all the name calling? Why are you Ben Boring Zion? And why is what did you call you, Popsicle or something? I mean, what's up with the name calling? She's adopting the Trumpian strategy of name calling.
Right. At the same time, calling for civility, and you know, but I mean, there's a little give and take here. I like Rachel a lot. She's a good person. She's doing good work with her campaign and running a great campaign. I'm not going to try to understand everything that she says. Some of it's quite strange, to be honest, and has very little to do with building out a policy club and having policy initiatives that have success on the national stage.
Mr. Holsopple said he didn't understand a word she was talking about when she was talking about going on a rocket ship. Did you understand?
Yeah, there was a couple of times where I didn't quite understand what she was going on about.
Well, I don't know. I don't understand the rocket ship metaphor. I'm not sure if it's a metaphor or if she's talking about like a SpaceX, like reusable rockets. I'm not sure like what that was either.
Right. I don't know exactly. There are very real concerns about existential risks to humanity and how we are going to deal with some of those things. And there is a very real sense. You know, it's something that we've touched upon. You know, with the building of the industrial space elevator, I worked with a gentleman and his team of engineers. This gentleman's name is Nikolai Agapov, and he has designed a low-cost industrial space elevator. It does not go entirely from the ISS to the Earth, but it shortens the distance significantly, which reduce rocket fuel costs. And that's something that we could build literally, you know, this consortium of guys working together on rockets, that amount of money would be a change that they have under their purse. Musk was referred to in this talk as well. Or rather, change that they have under their couch. I do take these spacebound concerns and near-Earth industrialization concerns very seriously, but I cannot speak to whether that metaphor is a literal one or just a colorful way of speaking.
The hidden hero of the debate is Gennady. He did some excellent questions. He trapped people in beautiful questions, and something he asked you was about your posts on Facebook about anti-Donald Trump notions. How did you deal with that question? How did you feel about that question? Because it was a strong question.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I have not minced words about Donald Trump, largely as it relates to public policy. There's an awful lot of things that you could say about Donald Trump, but the main point would be that he ran as a rightward economic populist, and the populism, in fact, that he offered to people was a sham. He has done harm to the workforce. He has done harm to other worker initiatives and protections, and done harm to people in the broadest sense of citizen protections along these economic lines. And that is why we have to have something like a basic income, because of these kind of policy initiatives, Reaganomics, which he's engaged in. This has been going on for many decades in the United States, and this overwhelmingly corporatist running of the federal government has led us to the point where we do not now have a middle class that is strong enough to survive to moving to a fully post-industrial society. And that is why we need this stopgap solution in the form of a basic income funded from natural land leases. It won't hurt anyone. It will help an awful lot of people. It will be a great step forward for the United States. And similarly, e-governance will hasten techno progress. And as these kind of protections for workers, keeping the wolf from the door in the basic income would. And so all of those things taken on the whole will move our civilization out of the danger zone and into a place that can survive to this space-bound civilization.
Let's talk about another juicy bit of controversy that just happened. Humanity Plus. Rachel Haywire, pretty much almost, as far as I can tell, wrote the whole institution off because they got funding from Jeffrey Epstein. That's what they're saying.
That's insane. Yeah.
Well, you didn't like that, did you? Well, go on about that.
Right. So Jeffrey Epstein is a bad man. He's very rightly doesn't have his freedom anymore. That's very little to do with the founders of our organizations and related organizations. In the same breath, Rachel Haywire is talking about getting together her own cryonics plan. Good luck with that when you're attacking the people who also run Alcor. Yeah, I don't think that was a smart kind of thing. But no, we are having a lot of fun with this, but attacking our constituents it's pretty far over the line. One of your guys wants to know about UFO disclosure, Area 51. He says he can have my vote if I support UFO disclosure. So yes, other candidates have described Freedom of Information Acts along these lines. There is a Freedom of Information Act, a portion of my platform, and I would include this initiative in that. Let's get to the bottom of that.
Well, there you go. You scoop one vote on UFO disclosure, and possibly all of the votes that would have come from the Area 51 thing. So anyone who went to Area 51, maybe you just got their vote, so they don't have to run at machine guns now. But anyway, you believe in alien life, right? You're an alien life guy.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's a reasonable question why the Fermi paradox, we don't have a good answer to it. So I guess I do believe in that to some degree. I certainly believe in truth and transparency in government. That's really the underlying issue here. The extent to which multicellular life exists outside of our world, it's an open question. I'd like to see some answers. Maybe the U.S. government has some of those answers. And as president, it would be fun to find out.
It would be. So tell me, how are you going to combat this name calling that's going on? Because it doesn't look like it's going to stop. It doesn't look like it's going to stop. It looks like she's doubling down on this tactic. Are you going to ignore it? You're going to ignore it.
I mean, in the course of these attacks, which really stemmed from something pretty simple. Rachel Haywire has not been campaigning as much as these other candidates, and then she propositioned Gennady and said that she could not make it to her own acceptance speech unless she was given a nice slush fund. And this is at a time when this campaign is still going on. This is kind of, again, an example of crazy, unstable behavior. But it kind of then escalated into the crying and the weird behavior that you saw. Try and keep it together. But honestly, it doesn't matter. That kind of stuff drives traffic to the site. The membership numbers have spiked a little bit as a result. So I don't think that it's a great crisis. But we do need to try and stay on point with talking about policy and not about hurt feelings.
I asked Rachel Haywire when she came on just the other day if you two especially are running completely different campaigns. You're a very logical policy empiricist, like you're an empiricist. You like facts and knowledge and wisdom and that sort of thing.
That's right.
And she's very creative, and she's on the creative side, and it's all very cultural and somewhat fuzzy, but with grand schemes and grand ideas. And I asked her, are you guys not seeing eye to eye, but you're running in the same direction? I'm going to ask the same question to you. Do you think you two are running in the same direction, but you're not seeing eye to eye, and that therefore that's why there's a clash?
Yeah, sure. We're running in the same direction, but there's an awful lot of things that I disagree with. First and foremost, it's nothing to do with Rachel's personality or problems that she's having. It has to do with the fact that her basic income is not fully funded. Mine is. Mine makes a better case to improving quality of life in this country and getting us closer to the things that transhumanists want. She's maybe more of a singularitarian, techno-singularitarian than I am on certain regards, but in terms of actually working towards that as a policymaker, she falls miserably short.
So how are you feeling after that debate going in? We've got 6 days, 12 hours, 42 minutes until membership closes. What's your plans personally after that debate? How are you feeling, and what do you think you're going to do, to continue your campaign?
There's a lot of exciting new things that are going on. I just finished a rough cut of a mini documentary that deals with ideas around techno-spiritualism and digital personhood. It's a question that came up in the debate, and I felt that question was a good one that Gennady gave me. And I mentioned that I didn't think that the wording needed to be changed about artificial personhood in this Constitution. But I still do think that there's different, just as I think that maybe my approach is better than Rachel Haywire's, I think that there's different ways to look at things like this. And there's a lot of concerns, real security concerns for election results in the United States around advanced algorithms, and ultimately that will arise around artificial personhood. I don't consider the bots that exist today that influence the last 3 elections in the United States to a relatively high degree. I don't consider these to be artificial persons, but some people in interacting with them do fall prey to that. So it's a problem. But the main thing is that we are supporting one another and making good steps towards techno progress in general.
Are you going to go after those Humanity Plus people now? Now that Rachel doesn't seem to want those people?
Yeah, sure. I know Natasha Vitamore, and I know a number of people in that organization, and I would be pleased to talk with any of them who wants to do an interview, who wants to be involved in what we're doing. That is an awful lot of the support that we have in this country is coming from organizations like Humanity Plus, and it's at the same time it's good that we are able to criticize these things. Jeffrey Epstein's not a good guy, and some of the ideas that he had, which I do not regard to be the best of transhumanism. But as we know, transhumanism encompasses a lot of worldviews, and the marketplace of ideas has room for many of those worldviews. Some neo-eugenicist ideas are less controversial than some of the things that he's espoused. But even so, we should stay away from that term. But we do want to stay open to a biological upgrades to the human form, so far as it's done responsibly and in this, as we're able to elevate the civil society in the larger sense in terms of human development.
What do you think? Did you think of was there any zinger questions that you really thought Gennady really hit on the head? Like any that stood out in your mind?
No, I mean those were all relevant questions and good questions.
For example, something that stood out in my mind was he questioned Mr. Holtzappel's association with transhumanism, because Mr. Holtzapfel has admitted that he's a bit new to AI and he's a bit new to the whole transhumanism thing, and he sort of called him out on that, and I think Mr. Holtzapfel had a very good response personally to that. Do you see Mr. Holtzapfel as somebody who is firmly involved in the transhumanist movement and should be and is here to stay because he recognizes what it's all about?
Yeah, he's here to stay. He recognizes what it's all about. The thing about that is, I've made a point of talking about de facto life extensionists and the fact that this is a big tent that we're building. So I'm not going to criticize Mr. Holsopple for not having been familiar with certain life extension concepts or certain advanced algorithm concepts some months ago. His organization is doing good work. I'd be more inclined to criticize him on the fact that some of the ideas that he's described in Project 222, these are awareness issues and the issues for the private sector, more so than issues that are federal public policy initiatives. So that's where the futurist New Deal is above these other campaigns, because we're not sitting around just telling jokes and shouting and crying. We're working on writing the best kind of policy platform that we can, and these other guys, they don't quite measure up in that regard.
To be fair, Mr. Holsopple is definitely a very serious-minded person on this panel, and as a candidate, I think yes. I would never. But you can say what you want. I'm not here to tell you what to say. Going on about Mr. Holsopple, so you guys seem to have a difference of opinion on the word globalist. Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, I mean that was just a larger critique of the way that this word is used around. It's thrown around. It's a weasel word, a word that is used when the goalposts will tend to move when this term is used. People are often expressing it in great outrage and emotional noise that doesn't really describe any specific problem. So I have very serious concerns about economic policy, and I've made an awful lot of entrees into describing these. But at the end of the day, if you talk about those regulatory concerns in the same breath as post-nationalism, and don't unpack any of that and don't describe any ideas that are a little more interesting, just kind of bellowing at people, screeching at people, spitting into the wind, and that sort of thing is all too common in political discussions. So we have to try to keep it a little more intelligent.
My final question, because I've actually got to run, because if you're watching, stay on, because we've actually got a show coming up after this with another guest coming on, so I've actually got to run. But the final question I want to put to you, China Hawk, China Dove, China policy versus Rachel Haywire, expand on that. That seemed to be a pretty controversial topic that came up.
Well, that's another in a series of controversies created by this campaign because they don't have a lot to actually talk about. The position that I have of China would be far more aggressive than the position that we currently have. But we shouldn't just be making up nonsensical campaigns about ending all global trade. That's not something that any economist would seriously consider. Every economist that writes about these things that is at all in the mainstream is viewing the tariffs that exist in the United States as quite disruptive. So that's the most important thing. Yeah, I'm not a China dove, but we have to actually talk about the real world and not just the mothership and not just make silly quips.
Johannon Ben Zion, thank you for coming on Detonation for an analysis and your thoughts regarding that debate. That was a great debate, and thanks Gennady for sending people over, and so we can have this debate to a great audience. Thanks
Thanks to everyone who watched and participated. Please check out the Futurist New Deal. We have a lot of information to share with you. Thanks again for supporting my campaign, everybody.
Detonation, more coming all your way this week. Check out the next show. It's going in 5 minutes.